on. Open City Council special meeting and work session for Tuesday, May 11th. Need an approval of the agenda, but hang on. Bruce, were you going to add something?
Yes, sir. What I'd like to add is consideration and review of the finishes that we're looking at for the roof work at Cannon Beach Elementary. The reason I'm asking for that tonight is it has to go through thank you, design review. And we have to get that to them by Thursday. So we can talk more about that. And Sean Smoot will be on the phone with some more information. So if you would add that to the agenda, I would appreciate it.
Okay, it's number 7.
Okay, thank you.
We're going to put that at the very end. Is that what we want to
Yes.
do?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, with the amended agenda, I need an approval.
I move that we approve the agenda
As amended?
as amended. Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Okay, we have consent for a series of minutes. Anybody have any questions, concerns about the minutes?
I mean, I could, but I don't. You want.
With that, then it change the intent, so.
Okay, and consideration?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second. Sorry.
That's all right. Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
Thank you. Now, I believe all our commenters are on certain items, so we do not have any public comment. Unless you've heard anything lately, Jennifer?
No.
Thank you. And we'll go straight to our first presentation, Recology.
Now I'll turn it over to Karen.
Karen?
Dave Larmouth is here to go over the rate analysis report for Recology, Western Oregon for the year. Before I introduce Dave, I just wanted to recognize Carl Peters and his team. They made a commitment to us a little over a year ago to change out all of our trash cans in Cannon Beach with the latch lid type closures to prevent our cans from tipping over and trash going everywhere. And they have completed that project. So residents had the opportunity to have their cans changed out at no charge to them to have them swap them out. And that project's been completed. So I just want to recognize them for that effort. Despite COVID, it slowed them down a little bit, but they got it done. So Dave, are you on?
Is there?
Yes, ma'am. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, councilors. This is Dave Larmouth. I'm the rate analyst for Recology Western Oregon, and I'm here tonight to answer any questions you may have on the rate review report we submitted. You've gotten most of the information on the wind latches already. I do have a few more details I can provide. And then I also have some details on our COVID response and our return to what we hope is normal or nearly normal, or the new normal. But if you had any questions, we can start there if you prefer.
Dave, I failed to mention that you guys will not be doing a rate change this year, so our rates will remain the same.
Thank you.
That's true. So no need to, I guess, bury the lead on that one. But as far as our COVID response, the big issue that we had coming into the whole shutdown is how long it would last. And we were wrong. We've been wrong. But our our projections do take into account the assumption that at some point during this rate year, things will get back closer to normal. The biggest improvement I think we'll see when we're able to have our office staff back in the office will be an improvement in the hold times and the customer experience when they call into us. We've had a lot of technical challenges trying to connect people from their homes into our server down to Sacramento and back up to the phone system to connect to our customers. And sometimes that delay has been significant. Hold times have been a challenge for us. Currently, right now, if you send us an email to rwoinfo@recology.com, we usually have one rep that's monitoring that email as basically their entire job. So if it's a fairly straightforward thing, you may get a response and a resolution to your issue via email faster than you would if you had your neighbor call at the same time. So under normal circumstances, that would be unacceptable. But for now, we're making it work. But we do recognize that some folks are probably pretty frustrated with that. Other than that, we've been pretty fortunate in terms of our own employees and avoiding any serious outbreaks. We've had people miss time and had to cover with supervisors or managers, and occasionally even one of our mechanics who happens to have a CDL has had to jump on a truck to get things done. But we got through that, and the fires. And the fires disrupted us more temporarily than the COVID situation did. So we've been lucky, but we recognize that a lot of our customers have not. Basically, from March through March, we didn't suspend any residential customers for non-payment. We had, I think, very flexible terms and payment plans that we were able to set up for folks. Basically, if they called us and contacted us at all and told us, that they were working on it, we took them off the suspend list. Unfortunately, it's not our preferred communication method with customers, but there are some folks who won't call us until we don't pick up their garbage. And then it's, like I said, it's not the communication prompt that we prefer, but it is effective.
Believe me, it's very effective.
Yes.
Brandon, have you not been paying your bill?
We don't discuss customer information here. So that's really the big piece, and we're not concerned too much about where we are projecting for the rate of return. I think it's just not the time yet to talk about things like that. So we'll probably come in a little under where we would normally like to be, but we're going to make it work. The other thing about the wind latch is we'd estimate that we are something like 98% of the carts that are out there have a wind latch. There are a few where the homeowners haven't been around and have their carts put away where we can't access them. We don't go into people's yards or into their garages looking for the carts usually. So if they're not around and the cart's not out, they haven't been swapped out. So anybody that wants a latch that doesn't have one, they should call or actually email us, and we'll get them on the list. The driver that does that work for us is still making regular trips through the area, handling those tickets. So we'll get those done. We have had a few customers remove the latch, and we're real sure how to feel about that. So we've documented it. And my understanding is we have a list of those folks, and I think the plan is to contact them and point out to them or ask them, did you know that this latch is on here? And the city would sure like you to have one, and we'd like you to have one, and we'd definitely like you to not cut it off. Don't want it. But there are a few folks in that category as well. And that's about all I have on the wind latches, other than the impact. So there was no charge directly or indirectly to the city or the customers to do that work. And the only charge going forward would be, or the only impact, I should say, going forward, is that it takes a little longer to service the carts for some of the wind latches. And so I guess over time, there will be a small increase in the total route hours that are assigned to Cannon Beach, because it will take a little longer to provide service to those carts. The trade-off is obviously that the streets look better and the drivers aren't spending as much time having to pick up things that have knocked over or blown away. So that should probably balance out.
I have a question on the latches. Is it just the garbage cart that has the latch, or does the recycling one have one too?
So the project was to get wind latches on all the recycling carts because we don't want the material bagged, and we encourage people to bag their garbage. So there's less of a problem in general with garbage blowing around, more likely to be recyclables. Wind latches are available for garbage carts for anyone that requests them, and they're so it's possible to get them on there, but the project was to get them on the recycle carts.
Okay, so I might be one of your recycling customers that don't have a latch.
You can get them on both, like he says. All you have to do is just ask for it.
Okay.
It helps with raccoons too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Dave, I was just a little curious, how's the recycling program working this past year?
For the most part, pretty well. We've had a lot more folks have been spending more time out here if they're second homeowners or working from home. And so we've saw, especially early on, sort of an increase in contamination and confusion. Folks were ordering things online that maybe they hadn't before. And so a lot more of those weird plastic things that sort of look like an envelope, but have bubble wrap built into them, or are made of plastic, showing up in the paper. So some more contamination, but overall, it's been pretty good as far as folks figuring out the rules. We do have some customers where that's more of a challenge, and so we continue the outreach for them. Was that there's lots of things we could talk about recycling, but was there something specific you were interested in?
I'm just curious if you guys saw dramatic changes in the program, and it doesn't sound like it. So that's just curious.
Sure.
Anybody else? Oh, great. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Very happy with the service.
Christy, I want a headset with a chin mic like that too.
Yes. They are comfortable, and it spares my wife from hearing the Recology COVID report over and over again.
By the way, your employees, your drivers in particular, are all so courteous, friendly. You got to wave to them every time you see them. Anyway, they should be complimented. You should be complimented for developing a staff like that.
I will pass that along. I can't take any of the credit, but it's definitely good to hear.
Okay, thank you, and we'll move on to our next item. Which is right here. Public hearing for APP 2102 Roberts Appeal. Yeah.
I'll turn it over to Jeff. I'm sorry.
Me?
Yes, please.
Yeah, and I think Bill should be logging on soon, so. So a little background on this. First off, I want to thank the public for their input. I want to thank the Planning Commission also for their good work on this. And thanks to Jen for keeping the public record up to date. And just posted just prior to the meeting some more materials. If you haven't seen those, they're up there on the website. And so a little background on this, the City of Cannon Beach Planning Commission rendered a decision to deny this variance request, the V2102 for an oceanfront setback reduction in conjunction with the new residence for Stanley and Rebecca Roberts, tax lot 600 of map 51031 AA located off Manana Avenue west of South Hemlock on a vacant 1.1 acre lower density residentially zoned vacant property. At its April 1st, 2021 specially called Planning Commission meeting, after duly noticed public hearing on February 25th, continued to March 25th. The PC findings are attached. Stanley Robert requested a review of the decision and application and letter received April 15th, 2021. Within the 14th consecutive calendar days appeal period. They have requested either a limited scope or de novo for the reasons provided in their appeal letter. And the city council decided as a non-hearing item at its regularly scheduled business meeting of May 4th to hear the appeal on the record. Item has been noticed for this hearing. And this May 11th meeting and the 120-day rule final decision must be reached by May 28th or an extension granted by the applicant. I'd like to just kind of touch on the main Planning Commission's findings, then any questions you might have.
Jeff, before you do that, let me ask my questions for the council.
Oh, okay.
Does anyone object to the jurisdiction of the city council to hear this appeal at this time? Does any counselor believe he or she has a personal bias to declare? No. Does any counselor believe he or she has a conflict of interest? Has any counselor made an ex parte contact or made a site visit? Site visit. Is there any additional new correspondence, which I think we've just been notified? They are all posted up to date. And now, Jeff, you may go ahead.
Variance criteria 1784-10, the purpose of a variance is to provide relief when a strict application of the zoning requirements would impose unusual practical difficulties or unnecessary physical hardships on the applicant. And 1784-30 criteria for granting A says variances to a requirement of this title with respect to lot area and dimension setbacks, yard area, lot coverage, height of the structures, vision clearance, decks and walls, and other quantitative requirements may be granted only if, on the basis of the application, investigation evidence submitted by the applicant, all four expressly written findings are made. And so I will skip to the first findings here on page 5 of the Cannon Beach Planning Commission's findings about the strict or literal interpretation and enforcement of the specified requirement would result in practical difficulty or unnecessary hardship and would be inconsistent with the objectives of the comprehensive plan. And so the findings, the hardship identified by the applicant is that a home allowed under the oceanfront setback is smaller than the home desired by the property owner. That Cannon Beach has a significant number of homes, including oceanfront homes under 1,400 square feet in floor area. The applicant makes a number of claims regarding hardship, including the resulting this is a quote, "The resulting small dwelling does not provide any reasonable return on the applicant's investment in this lot." The Cannon Bench Planning Commission finds that the impact of the oceanfront setback on the building area is not an unnecessary hardship. Similarly, Planning Commission finds restricting the developable percentage of the parcel in this instance does not meet this criterion. Further, they disagree with the applicant that the lack of a return on investment can constitute an unnecessary hardship or practical difficulty for variance purposes. Even if restricting the house to 1,400 square feet on this parcel constitutes an unnecessary hardship or practical difficulty for variance purposes, applicants failed to provide sufficient evidence that additional square footage could not be gained from seeking a setback reduction or variance from setbacks to the north, east, and especially south sides of the proposed house, rather than the oceanfront setback. On criteria 2, that there are exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions applicable to the property involved or the intended use of the property, which do not apply generally to other properties in the same zone. And findings, the applicant has stated that the strict interpretation of the oceanfront setback presents exceptional and extraordinary circumstances. The interesting proposition that has not been explored by the applicant yet would offer additional buildable area to the footprint and to the floor area ratio is a southern variance to within 5 feet of the property Nenana Avenue property line. Presumably, the reason a setback reduction under Cannon Beach Municipal Code 1764 wasn't sought to the north, south, or east may have been due to other priorities, but it should be noted that these setback areas offer up to approximately 650 additional square feet to the building envelope without the need for a hardship variance. The applicant states that the point of the variance is to make allowances for hardships caused by government-imposed zoning restrictions that limit the buildable footprint of the dwelling, end quote. It is interesting to note that in the March 4th letter and analysis, the applicant notes that these are government-imposed zoning restrictions and that there are no other RL zone lots where zoning restrictions limit the development potential lot in such an extreme manner, end quote. Yet every home has a government-imposed zoning restrictions by ways of setbacks, lot coverage, floor area ratio, and building height limitations. And practically every home with ocean frontage, wetlands, stream corridors, and geohazards have large portions of their properties impacted by these very same government-imposed zoning restrictions. The Planning Commission, focusing on the RL zone and not just the nearby area, finds that like all properties, the applicant's property is somewhat unique, but not so unique as to qualify as exceptional circumstances entitling the applicant to a variance. On criterion 3, that the granting of the variance will not be detrimental to the public health, safety, and welfare, material injuries to properties or improvements in the near vicinity. And the Planning Commission notes that for this property, whether this is a buildable lot is not at issue in this variance. The applicants have not provided sufficient information to allow a conclusion that the variance will not be detrimental to public safety and welfare, or will not material injure the property to improvements in the near vicinity. For example, to show the lack of aesthetic harm, the applicant provided in the application a photo rendering of the purported appearance of the proposed home. But this illustration shows a driveway that is drastically different from the plan submitted in the underlying application for development permit. The driveway shown in the illustration has not been approved or even reviewed by the city at this time, and thus does not provide a valid basis for determining the aesthetic consequences of moving the home 31.5 feet toward the public beach. Moreover, the focus of this criterion is on the variance itself, and the applicant did not provide information about the relative geotechnical hazards for a home built in compliance with the oceanfront setback versus the proposed home 31.5 feet farther west. The Planning Commission interprets this portion of the criterion broadly to include not just physical damage, but aesthetic damage as well. Evidence and testimony was submitted by the owners of the cabin property that demonstrated the significant impact the granting of the variance would have on their views to the south. Accompanied the letter from Mr. Rasmussen dated March 11, 2021, including surveys, photos, and renderings. And in fact, even applicants agree that the granting of the variance will result in a reduction of 8 degrees in the cabin. This blocking of adjacent property views is one of the injuries that the oceanfront setback is intended to prevent. The variable setback standard ensures that nearby homes on the ocean shore are built at about the same distance from the beach, thus preserving the aesthetic quality of the coastline, as well as the scenic views of the existing neighbors. The Planning Commission finds that the criterion is not satisfied by the application. On 4, the granting of the variance would support policies contained within the comprehensive plan. Findings, first, General Development Policy 16 and Policy 11 is to provide flexibility in regulations governing site design so that developments can be adapted to specific site conditions. These policies relate to the nature of regulations to be adopted in the future, not the individual application of those regulations. They are inapplicable to individual variance applications. Of central importance, Housing Policy 1 states that in order to maintain the city's village character and its diverse population, the city will encourage the development of housing which meets the needs of a variety of age and income groups, as well as groups with special needs. The Planning Commission finds that the smaller home allowed under the oceanfront setback rules is consistent with the city's village character and will provide housing for a larger range of age and income groups. And then, however, further in the findings, however, it should also be noted that General Development Policy 6 might be the most appropriate. 6 says the scale of residential development shall be controlled in part through standards for lot coverage and maximum gross square footage. This policy speaks most directly to the applicant's concern that the 73% reduction in buildable lot area places an undue burden on the property owner. And more importantly, the oceanfront setback directly serves this policy. Its primary purpose is to provide for development of homes on the ocean shore that are built at about the same distance from the beach, thus preserving the aesthetic quality of the coastline, as well as the scenic views of existing neighbors. Otherwise, some owners will race to build as close to the beach as possible, destroying the natural character and blocking neighboring views. Granting the requested variances in the application for the purpose of allowing applicants to build a larger home and provide for a larger return on investment would be in direct contradiction of this policy. The Planning Commission finds that this criterion is not met. B, variances in accordance with this section should not ordinarily be granted if the special circumstances on which the applicant relies are a result of the actions of the applicant or owner or previous owners. The findings say the applicant contend that this criterion is satisfied because the request is not a self-imposed hardship or difficulty, since no actions have been undertaken by the Roberts or the previous owners that have changed the size of the lot or negatively impacted the development of the property. As the staff report points out, however, neither city nor anyone else has created unnecessary hardship, difficulty, or special circumstances warranting a variance on the property. The oceanfront setback code was in existence and has not been changed since the property was purchased by its current owners. The location of the oceanfront setback on the property is also the same as when the property was bought. Thus, a hardship based on a lack of return on investment or inability to build an economically viable home would be inappropriate here. Even though we find that the circumstances advanced by the applicant does not constitute a hardship or practical difficulty to warrant the granting of variance, none of these circumstances result from the actions of applicants, the owners, or prior owners. Accordingly, the Planning Commission finds this criterion is met. So the Planning Commission's decision, the motion, having considered the evidence in the record on a motion by Commissioner Kerr to deny and seconded by Commissioner Burnt, the J. Raskin application on behalf of Stan and Becky Roberts for variance request of 31.5 feet from 119.1 feet from the statutory vegetation line to 87.6 feet The Kenny Beach Planning Commission application number B1-02 is hereby denied by unanimous vote of 7 in favor and none opposed. Upon request for city staff, they submit the draft findings and they eventually approved it on April 1st, 2021. I would state that if you guys decide to move to approve or deny tonight, that you make a tentative, I would suggest do a tentative motion to approve or deny and ask staff to bring back the draft findings. And then you guys, I think at the 18th, could then review this. Any questions from anyone?
Questions? Bill, do you have anything you want to add to Jeff's?
A few minor things. First, I'd remind you, as Jeff stated at the beginning, this is an on-the-record hearing that you guys decided at your last hearing. So we want to keep an eye out for additional evidence. So, listen to the arguments that are made, but there shouldn't be any new evidence that comes in. The criteria are pretty straightforward. There's just 4 of them. Is there a practical difficulty or unnecessary hardship? Are there exceptional or extraordinary circumstances? Would a variance be detrimental to public health, safety, or welfare, or materially injurious to their neighbors? And would the grant support the policies of the comprehensive plan? And that's really what the Planning Commission focused on, and what you should hear arguments about as well. And I think Jeff also indicated that he posted some new material. I don't know if he was able to get that to you, or if you had time to read it in time for tonight's meeting. I would suggest, if you're concerned about that, to follow Jeff's suggestion of a tentative decision. And then if you haven't had full time to digest those new materials, look at them over the next week before the special meeting, and we can talk about whether it changes your mind when we talk about the findings.
Great, thanks, Bill. Okay.
I'd like just clarification on that. This is a hearing on the record, not receiving additional evidence, testimony. So the new information that we may or may not have seen the last day, that is information that still supports the record. Just, you're not talking about new information coming in that's not on the record.
Right. Any people are still allowed to make arguments and to talk about the evidence that is in the record, but you shouldn't look at any new evidence. And evidence is defined by statute to be facts, documents, data, or other information offered to demonstrate compliance or non-compliance with the standards believed by the proponent to be relevant to the decision. So if there's new study about the stability of the slope, or if there's new study about, the size of new houses in Cannon Beach, that's all out. But if somebody says, this doesn't fit because look at what happened, based on the sale of new homes in Cannon Beach that was introduced to the Planning Commission, they can argue about that.
Okay, just wanted to clarify
Sometimes
that.
a fine line.
Okay. Other concerns? Okay. The appeal will be reviewed against the criteria of Municipal Code 1780, conditional uses, and 1788, public deliberations and hearings. The hearing will be held on the record and no new evidence may be allowed into the record. The pertinent criteria to be considered are noted in the staff reports. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed towards those criteria or other criteria in the comprehensive plan of municipal code which the person testifying believes to apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and all the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal based on that issue. Prior to the conclusion of the initial evidentiary hearing, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional testimony, arguments, or evidence regarding the application. The City Council shall grant such request by continuing the public hearing or leaving the record open for additional written testimony, arguments, or evidence. Persons who testify shall first receive recognition from the mayor, state their full name and mailing address, and if appearing in a representative capacity, identify whom they represent. Testimony is limited to matters which are raised at the planning commission hearing in writing or orally. Now, we will go to our presentation by the appellant. I believe that's Andrew Stamp.
Mayor Seidel, just one quick moment before Mr. Stamp testified. You, in the prepared script, there's talk about continuance or leaving the record open, and that's if it's an evidentiary hearing. Because it is not an evidentiary hearing, you're not required by open record period or continuance. You could if the council chooses to do so, but you don't have to.
Okay, and of course, the additional testimony would be specific to the appeal.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Andrew, you have him?
Yes, he should be connecting here shortly.
Okay.
Unmute.
Heard ya.
Hi, this is Andrew Stamp. Can you guys hear me?
Well, yes.
I wonder why I'm not. Can you see me? I don't know if you can see me or not. Not that that's very important, but cannot see me. Okay. Well, I'm not going to worry. Well, actually, I need to do a PowerPoint. So let me see if I can share my screen.
Should be able to. Yep.
Yes, that works.
Okay. You know, I've done quite a few of these Zoom meetings now, but they always seem to make me nervous, and they're, you know, how to do them. But in any event, thank you for hearing this appeal tonight. My name is Andrew Stamp. My address 4248 Galewood Street, Lake Oswego, Oregon. So last fall, we submitted a request for development for a home. And part of that required the city to decide how to interpret this oceanfront setback. And we were hoping that the city would interpret it one way, but the city decided to interpret it a different way. And it resulted in the setback being 119 feet. So for purposes of this variance request, we are assuming that that is what the setback is 119 feet. At the hearing last fall in December, we heard the city council say, you know, ask why didn't we apply for a variance? And we sort of interpret that as being that the city council wanted us to apply for a variance. And really that was the reason that we submitted it. You know, we went back and looked at the criteria for a variance and thought, yeah, we meet these criteria. And so we decided to submit this application. We also listened to feedback pertaining to the elevated bridge structure that had been previously proposed. And I wanted to talk about that a little bit. It's not relevant to this case really, but you know, what happened was the city had originally told the applicant, Stan, that the city wanted him to build a public road and to do it to ODOT standards. And so that elevated bridge structure was kind of the result of that request. I think when everyone looked at it, everyone kind of agreed, boy, that's a real monstrosity. No one wants that, including us. We didn't really want it. And so, but we heard back from the Public Works Department staff saying that they would prefer to see an at-grade private driveway instead of this elevated bridge structure. So, and that would result in a ground floor entry to the dwelling. So when we did the variance request, we assumed a ground entry based on a private driveway concept. The access is not part of the variance. We just really showed conceptually how it would be feasible to access the property without an elevated bridge structure. So I just wanted to clarify that. Staff did a good job of explaining what the purpose of a variance is. And I wanted to, before getting into the criteria, I wanted to say that in Oregon, courts have said that a variance is a government permit authorizing the use of a particular piece of land in a way that is otherwise prohibited in the land use zoning ordinances. As one court had noted, a variance by definition is a use of property which is expressly prohibited by law. So what it really is asking for permission to do something that the law doesn't allow, which in this case is ask to reduce the setback from 119 feet to 87 feet. And so that's where you get the criteria is, you know, the idea is that the city council should evaluate that request and see if it results in difficulties, hardships, extraordinary circumstances, those sorts of things. Now, so really what this is about is kind of it ends up being a balancing test. You're trying to balance the goal of having that setback and what the purpose of the setback and why is it there, balance that against the hardship that is imposed on the landowner in complying with it. And if you think that that it's pretty harsh consequence to the landowner to comply with 119-foot setback, you can reduce that setback by the requested amount, which in this case, you know, reduce it to 87 feet. And if you find that you don't think it's a hardship, then you just deny the variance. So that's really how that works. Now when one of the things in this case, we have these first two criteria, and that's really where it goes into practical difficulties and unnecessary hardship. In this case, the oceanfront setback reduces the buildable footprint of the lot from 2,640 feet to 700 feet. It's a 73% reduction. And then if you take all of the setbacks that apply to this property, it reduces the buildable portion of the site from a total site area of 5,394 square feet to 700 feet. It basically makes almost 90% of the lot non-buildable. And let me show you that in a picture there. Hopefully you can still see this slide. I can see Bill Kabizman. Can you still see that? Okay, great. So what I've shown in this slide here is the buildable footprint, also the total amount of the lot. And you can see 15-foot setback on the south. Without factoring in the oceanfront setback, you have a 15-foot on the ocean side, and you've got 5 foot to the north and to the east. When you add that oceanfront setback, what you get is a reduced area. 1,940 feet is gone because of the oceanfront setback, in addition to all the other setbacks. And on the entire lot, what you're left with is a very small little area there, 700 square feet. So that really gets to the crux of the issue here. The applicant is asking for a fairly minor reduction. You can see in this next slide, you can see we want to bring that small 700 square foot piece. We want to add 969 square feet, basically making roughly half of the site buildable. Now, so the question really is, do you want to grant that type of relief to the landowner, or do you want to enforce the setback? Now, in balancing the hardships to the parties, what you have on one hand, you have the neighbor, Haystack Rock, who objects to this, and they argue that, well, it's going to impede our view. And they've got, you know, a pretty big house, 4,800 square feet or so, and they've got an expansive 200-degree plus view. It's not clear from the record exactly how much of a view they have, but it's probably one of the best views in the city. And if we were to allow, if the city council were to allow this house to be built, it would reduce their view a little bit. And we can show the two slides from the parties prepared that shows comparison. They're pretty close. We think it's about an 8 to 10% degree reduction, which would be about a 5% reduction in their view. And it would allow us to build, instead of a 1,400 square foot house, it would allow us to build a 2,700 square foot house, plus or minus. So this case really asks is, you know, the reduction in a 5% or of view, the correct balancing to force someone to build a house that's really half as big as they want to build, or reducing the buildable footprint of the lot from 700 square feet to 700 square feet from its original 5,000 square foot lot. Now, I've heard, the staff said, well, there's lots of houses in town that have big swaths of their property that you can't build on because of the oceanfront setback. Now, in part, that's due because a lot of the lots extend out into the beach. Now, any portion of a lot that extends out into the beach really doesn't belong to the landowner. It belongs to the state because they have superior title. So to the extent that you see those lots going out into the sandy area of the beach, those really aren't part of the lot. And it's not clear why they're even platted that way. But I guess that was before they knew that the state owned the land, I guess. But in any event, in looking at all of the houses along the ocean front, I did not see any other house anywhere in City Cannon Beach that had a buildable footprint reduced anywhere close to the amount that this one had. Now, there were some houses that were built on very small lots and they maximized their footprint. But when you start with 3,000 square foot, you're going to not have a huge house to end up with. So that's a little bit different. That's an apples and oranges comparison. I also saw some places along the coast where some people had some fairly modest sized houses, but if they wanted to, they could replace them with a larger house. They just haven't done it yet. So this case really asks, how much of a reduction in a setback or in a view is really significant? Is reducing someone's view if they have 200-degree view arc, reducing that by 5%, 10 degrees or so, is that significant? The Planning Commission said that it was. And, if I were on City Council, I would kind of question that because that would really set some bad precedent for the city. You're going to have other people down the road saying, hey, you can't reduce my view by 10% because that's what you did in this other case. That seems like a very low number to me. In any event, the other thing to think about here is that this lot previously had a home built on it. And in this view right here, you can see the topography is kind of steep on the west side of the lot, but right where we show the buildable footprint of the house, it's pretty flat. And that was because someone at some point did some grading on that lot. That's not natural grade. That was graded. And we think that was probably done in the 1930s or 40s when the house was built on this lot. That house was built. We understand that that was done, that this lot was presented to some sort of business associate of Governor Oswald West, and that this house was built with his knowledge, and then in fact the lot was a gift to this person. So Governor West, living in the large house next door, at least some time of the year, did not think that that really impeded on his view. So I'm going to move on to the next slide here. This slide shows what we think is perhaps the view shed from the Haystack Rock property, the Oswald West cabin. In reality, I think it probably even extends further to the north because the Oswald West cabin can see over the tops of some of those other homes that are down lower than that. So, but the important part of this slide is we think that the reduction would be around 8 to 10%. This shows an 8% reduction view, and you can see that between the blue and the red line. So that's kind of a before and after. This was the first picture presented by Haystack Rock. They've now admitted that this one really had no basis in reality and really does not reflect anything related to this property. This is their new montage. it still has the wrong massing and the wrong scale, but at least with regards to the view corridor, we think, and what I mean by that is how far you could see out in the distance. In this photo, you can see them barely seeing Jockey Cap and the hills beyond that. We think that's pretty close to being correct. Certainly our view, now this is our mock-up photo montage, and you can see it's a different perspective because it shows more of the view and less of our home, but you can see that it's within a few degrees of what they presented. This is theirs again. This is ours. You can see that our view here shows the correct distance to our lot. This one shows that our building at a wrong angle, wrong scale, wrong massing. It looks a lot bigger than it really is in this photo. And you can see where you showed our proposed dwelling. But in any event, both of these photos are probably kind of within the margin of error of what can be expected from the technology that both of the parties applied to come up with these photo montages. We did ask the city council if it wanted something more specific in terms of we could have done, or we still could do if the city council would allow it, but we could still do a set of story poles, which is essentially putting a pole up on our property at the exact surveyed location of where the end of the house would be, and that way we could measure it. The Haystack Rock people conceptually agreed to that. I don't know that we worked out all the small details, but they were at least interested in the concept, and that's why I suggested it last week. I didn't hear any discussion about it at the city council, but you know, that's still a possibility if you wanted to do it. Okay, this slide right here shows the view of the trees as they exist now and how they cut into their view quite a bit as it was. Now, if our variance was granted, their view would be blocked a little bit more than what the current trees do, but the current trees do roughly cut half of our variance request in any event. So our variance request, in my estimation, is not that big of a deal. It's not that significant of a view reduction. This slide right here shows the view from the beach. Now, what I heard staff say is that this has not been approved, and therefore it shouldn't have been considered or something. I didn't really understand that point at all. But this variance request doesn't deal with the access. The access would be approved at a later time. There's no need to approve it now. As a matter of fact, it wouldn't make sense to approve it before we got the variance request. That's kind of putting the cart before the horse. But this photo montage shows what the dwelling would look like if the variance was approved, and in relation to the Oswald West cabin, which you could see right there off to the left. The other thing to think about here is that staff said a few minutes ago that we didn't address the relevant differences in the geologic hazards between the house sitting with the variance approved and with the house sitting with the variance not approved. I'm not sure who wrote that, but whoever it did not read the geologic report very carefully because it's kind of irrelevant to the way that the foundation system works. The foundation, the entire property is underlain with bedrock. And the way the foundation works is it ties the dwelling directly to the bedrock with a series of pilings, so that if there is a landslide, the liquefied dirt, which is essentially turned into mud, could flow underneath the house and it would not destroy the house. The house may not completely be completely saved if there was a huge landslide or something like that, but the house wouldn't be destroyed. And certainly anyone who's living in it would survive with that foundation system. So the way that system works, it really doesn't matter where you put it. It really just matters that it's tied to the bedrock. So I didn't want to belabor that too much, but that's certainly not a reason for denial. And it's also worth pointing out that the city council found that there were no geologic hazards last time. It actually rejected the arguments of Haystack Rock to the contrary when it found that the Rondima report adequately explained how those geologic hazards would be dealt with. I'm going to skip over this slide. This shows an alternate setback right here. Now, what I want to talk about with this slide is there was mention today about adding some square footage by taking a setback reduction to the south. What this slide shows is that really would not provide you with that much additional square footage. It would provide some, but the suggestion that we could bring the setback closer to the property line to the north and to the south, I find rather problematic because it's already a 5-foot setback, and we couldn't bring it on a 0 lot line because you have to have some room around the house to build the foundation. And if we put it any closer to the edge of the property, we'd actually have to trespass on the neighbor's lot in order to build the house. And my thought process is that the neighbor probably wouldn't be thrilled with that idea. So I'm not going to belabor this much more. I really just wanted to show those particular points. Getting back to this slide, really what we're asking for is really just a 30-foot reduction so that we can build a reasonable size house and bring that development square footage up from 700 square feet to we're adding another 900 square feet. So we're making about twice as big as what it was. And that would still make more than half of the lot not developable, and it would still preserve most of the views from the north. So that's all the testimony I have. I know Jay Raskin's probably waiting in the queues, and I think Becky Roberts is also would like to testify as well, if you can see her waiting in the queue as well. So unless there's any questions, I would turn this over to Jay. And I think I need to stop screen sharing in order to do that. Would there be any questions at this time?
Not yet.
Okay, is Jay there?
We're finding him.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yeah, he's there.
There, can you hear me?
Hi, Jay. Yep.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jay Raskin, the architect for the Roberts Project, and my address is 2418 Southwest Troy Street, Portland, Oregon, 97219. I wanted to add another consideration, which is whether the decision by the Planning Commission was fair and objective. Given the testimony, the Roberts building a house on their lot is clearly not popular, and this may have had influence. There are warning signs in the findings where the commission and staff are stretching to find justification for their decision, some of which, at least in my mind, are nonsensical or misleading. For instance, it questions why, it questions about the request, the idea of the variance that it was raised by the city council during a setback reduction appeal. And it doesn't mention that we actually received encouragement by the city planner to actually do this, the variance request. We wouldn't have actually even tried to do it without this, with this initial idea and this encouragement. Likewise, the Roberts were told by the city that an ODOT standard roadway for access would be required. And the findings make it seem that it wasn't a requirement. The findings make it seem that the Roberts would purposely choose the most costly solution to create an elevated structure disliked by everyone, including the Roberts. Contrary to what it states in the findings, the city changed its mind and then told the Roberts that it wanted a private at-grade driveway instead. It has been informally reviewed by the Public Works Director, who found it acceptable. but as Andrew noted, neither the roadway or the driveway plans have yet been approved because it's not part of the process. We're not at that part of the process. The safety of access continues to be questioned without much explanation or proof. Contrary to the findings, testimony was provided by a specialist that the approach for the driveway access was essentially the same as the roadway solution. He had also mentioned such things as the Chapman Point lots, which we did pull out of our analysis precisely because they have building envelopes and are thus really not relevant to ocean setback discussions. The variance request is about oceanfront setbacks affecting the Roberts property disproportionately, not a diatribe against oceanfront management, as the findings seem to indicate. The Planning Commission chose not to look at the RL zone as a whole, even when the exceptional circumstances deal with oceanfront setbacks that only apply to some properties in the zone. Finally, the Planning Commission based their decision by imposing their view on what an acceptable house size should be. This turns the zoning ordinances on its head. Yes, there are small houses in Cannon Beach, but this is somewhat irrelevant to the question. The zoning ordinances themselves set a maximum size based on FAR and lot coverage, and then lets the homeowners decide. The Roberts simply seek the choice that similar properties enjoy. Thank you.
Thanks, Jay. I have to ask if there are any other presentations by proponents. So is there,
Yeah, Stan has his hand up.
okay, Stan. We're there. There we are.
Hi. Okay. Good evening. My name is Becca Roberts. My home address is 925 Lake Street South, Unit 201, Kirkland, Washington, 98033. Good evening. Thank you for your time tonight. We also would like to thank the citizens who we don't even know who wrote in support of our application. We are here at your suggestion, a suggestion that was given when you denied the application for our home based upon an interpretation of the ocean setback. At the time, you suggested we ought to apply for a variance. The planning director also encouraged us to apply for this variance. We did as we were encouraged to do, and that is why we are here now. As it turns out, that was wise counsel in the sense that we do seem to meet all standards for variance. We feel badly, though, that the planning director changed his mind and instead asked the planning commission to deny our variance, which they did. Most of the findings are for denial are mistaken, as Mr. Raskin and our attorney Andrew Stamp have explained. So far as we can see, the real issue is whether the slight peripheral view impact of our proposed 2,700 square foot home on one neighbor who has a very large oversized property and very large oversized 4,400 square foot house is significant, especially since our house will be where another house stood for decades without any problems. We hope you will agree with us that ours is a very reasonable request and that you will approve our application. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we see anybody else with their hand raised for a proponent?
No.
Okay, so I will move on to presentations by opponents. And the first on my list is Will Rasmussen.
Okay.
Can you hear me and see me?
There we go. Thank you.
Hi. Will Rasmussen here. Address is 111 Southwest 5th Avenue, Portland, Oregon, 97204. We're in Suite 3400. I am still representing Haystack Rock LLC in this matter. Haystack Rock LLC owns the Oswald West cabin, the old governor's cabin, which abuts this subject site. I will try to be concise today, as the planning director and planning commission have thoroughly documented the problems with this application and nonconformance with the approval criterion for a variance request. I just hope to make 3 substantive points regarding the approval criteria that are not met. First, applicants identify no unusual practical difficulties or unnecessary hardships. Just wanting a bigger home is unfortunately quite common. Second, that the requested variance would contradict important comprehensive plan policies. And third, that the variance would injure nearby properties by blocking their views, not the least of which is my client's property, Haystack Rock LLC, and the Oswald West cabin, and the city's property of Inspiration Point, which is immediately south of this subject site across unimproved Nenana. First, though, by way of background, this property has sat undeveloped for decades because of its unsafe location, lack of access, steep slopes, geotechnical instability, and severely restricted building area under the oceanfront setback rules. The oceanfront setback has been codified in Cannon Beach Code since 1994, 7 years before applicants bought the subject site. Applicants now request a variance to move their proposed home 31 feet closer to the ocean, west than that allowed, than that's cited by my client's house. And before I get into the approval criteria, I just want to quickly correct a few statements and positions that applicants' representatives made today. First, applicants framed this for the council as just a decision about balancing the interests of them wanting a bigger home versus my client's view. Staff, planning director, and the planning commission have documented quite thoroughly that that is a false framing of the issue before you. There are a number of very legitimate city concerns at issue here, in addition to the view impact on surrounding properties, not the least of which is preservation of oceanfront vegetation, which is stated as one of the purposes of the oceanfront setback rule and documented in the city's comprehensive plan, mitigation of risk from oceanfront erosion, trying to keep all properties, all built development back from the beach is something that helps keep everybody safe here, and preserving the village character of Cannon Beach. A variance of home size around the city that includes both small homes is something that's part of the character of Cannon Beach. Further, applicants made several arguments today about their proposed road or driveway. They were again non-committal about what they're trying to propose in that right of way, unimproved Nenana with, it's currently vegetated with trees and bushes. All I want to flag for the council today on that is 2 things. First, applicants continue to take the position that they can get a flying road or a driveway or anything else approved in there without land use review. They say that they can just work with the public director to get it approved. I don't think that's right. I think such a proposal needs to go through land use review like anything else in Cannon Beach, and that the Cannon Beach City Council has final say on that. And that's my second point, is that you, the council, will have final exclusive discretion on whether or not you want to approve anything in that right of way. It's city property. It's not the Roberts property. One final clarification. Applicants argued today that there was a prior residence on this property. There was not. As shown in the record, there was a ramshackled A-frame on this property with no windows, doors, or plumbing. There was a structure there, but calling it a residence is just not accurate, and that's documented in the record. Even if there was such a prior residence on that property, it's legally irrelevant. The record shows that it was demolished in the 1980s. Lawful non-conforming use in the city of Cannon Beach, like most jurisdictions, gets a discontinuance of that non-conformance after 1 year of non-existence. That was obviously decades ago that ramshackled thing was there, and it does not provide any legal basis for applicants to argue that they can then jump out further west than everybody else in the city. Now, returning back to the approval criteria, under the first criterion, applicants must show that a practical difficulty or unnecessary hardship would result from the application of the zoning standard. Here they have to show that the oceanfront setback that everybody else complies with is a practical difficulty or unnecessary hardship. They argued in their original application that it would just make their home too small. They've subsequently argued that it takes too much FAR, floor area ratio. You'll recall the diagrams that applicant's attorney put up today. There's three problems with their argument in this regard. First, as documented in the original staff report in this matter, a 1,400 square foot home would be about the 45th percentile for homes in Cannon Beach. That is not an undue hardship. Second, the staff report also diligently shows that the application of the oceanfront setback on this lot is less than other lots in Cannon Beach. And third, probably most problematically, applicant's argument in this regard just proves too much. If not getting a 2,600 square foot home constituted an unnecessary hardship on this parcel, the same thing would apply on every other parcel in Cannon Beach, and that's just not right, and it would undermine the comprehensive plan if it were. Under the second variance criterion, applicant must show that the imposition of the code standard would be inconsistent with the objectives of the comprehensive plan. As the Planning Commission found, that's just not the case. There are numerous comprehensive plan provisions that support application of the oceanfront setback here, and in fact, ignoring it would undermine the comprehensive plan. Housing Policy 1 is to, quote, maintain the city's village character. That's something that's clearly important in Cannon Beach and something that defines it as a community. It's not defined by large homes encroaching into the oceanfront setback. Today, the city received a petition asking the council to deny this appeal, signed by 67 concerned residents of Cannon Beach, in order to, in their words, preserve the essence of their community. I think those residents are speaking directly to Housing Policy 1 about maintaining the city's village character. Similarly, Housing Policy 6 states that the city will strive to accommodate new residential development in a manner that is sensitive to the scale, character, and density of existing residential development patterns. The oceanfront setback furthers this comprehensive plan policy by just making sure owners stay about the same amount distance from the beach, and that both protects safety and protects each neighbor's view and protects the vegetative character of that beach line, which is documented as important to the city and the comprehensive plan. Finally, under the fourth criterion, applicant must show that their proposal will not injure nearby properties. I would say that applicant's presentation today further documented the injury to my client's property, simply saying that, well, we think it'll be 8 or 10 degree cutoff of a view is substantial. Even their diagram that they like to run out there that shows the red angles pointing north and south from my client's property shows that they're cutting off the beach view to the south. Currently, my clients have a beach view to the south. I'd say identically, if you consider it from the perspective of Inspiration Point, the city property across unimproved Nenana that citizens, including my clients, partnered with the city to acquire for public space, it cuts off the view to Haystack Rock. And that's a loss to that property if it were allowed. So we just respectfully ask the City Council affirm the Planning Commission's decision and reject this problematic variance. The Planning Director and Planning Commission have put in a lot of time and energy to consider the evidence, weigh the criteria, and render a decision. And this council should affirm that. Thank you for the opportunity to talk today.
Any questions for Will? Okay. Hey, Rusty, can we find Diana Turner? Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Hello, yes.
Hi, I'm Diana Turner. My address is 3524 Northeast Klickitat Street, Portland, Oregon, 97212. I also own a home in Cannon Beach. I'm speaking tonight for the group Friends of the Dunes at Cannon Beach. We have been opposing this development since its beginning. We're asking you counselors tonight to please stand strong and uphold our oceanfront setback rules. The Roberts have multiple times expressed their great appreciation and love for our beautiful coastline and unique community. And this is where we can all agree. Unfortunately, upon their decision to build on their lot, they're now asking us as a community to set aside the very rules and regulations that help protect and guarantee the continuation of all that makes Cannon Beach the special place that we know it is. We're asking that you preserve the historic and scenic beauty of this special stretch of shoreline. Our zoning ordinances are paramount to this. And though the lawyers are distilling this down to a very simple question of how big can this house be and whose view is affected, we as the larger community see it as a very important time to support and uphold our rules. We are going to see nothing but more of these types of assaults on our community and our planning rules. And we're asking you to stand strong and say no to this. The Roberts purchased their property with the, and you know this all, with these zoning rules in place. At the Planning Commission presentation, Mr. Stamp said the exceptional and unique situation that they were asking relief from in the ocean front setback rules is the 73% of loss of the lot's buildable area. But again, this was known or could have been known if they had done their due diligence. I happen to be a real estate investor, and I looked at the statutory warranty deed, and I was surprised at the all in bold notification. I've seen things similar to this, and I'm sure Councillor Risley can talk to this in more detail. I've seen things similar to this on purchase agreements, but somebody went to the bother to add it to the warranty deed. And what I'm talking about is, and I'm going to quote, "The instrument will not allow use of the property described in this instrument in violation of applicable land use laws and regulations. Before signing or accepting this instrument, the person acquiring fee title of the property should check with the appropriate city or county planning department to verify approved uses to determine any limits and lawsuits." Da, 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 da. Somebody went to a lot of effort to make sure that nobody came back to them and said this wasn't a buildable lot. The record shows that the Roberts knew this was not a buildable lot. Mr. Roberts said at the October 22nd Planning Commission meeting that the property was not stable enough to pursue development until the city completed its dewatering project in 2008. So now to the community, this feels like no good deed goes unpunished. So we've now made this potentially a buildable lot, providing a nice return for them if we set aside all of our rules. And that's asking too much. I would say that the other exceptional and unique situation is the amount that the Roberts paid for this property. 100 and I believe 50 and then 35. I'm sure someone can correct me if I'm wrong. I think that too speaks to the fact that this was a lot that everyone knew was going to be very difficult and probably not buildable. And so for them now to come to us and ask us to set aside all of our regulations that protect this community so that they can have a bonanza is asking too much. So please stand strong. I do realize that the Roberts have chosen to take their first attempt to assault our rules to LUBA, and I know that that must be in your minds that this too will probably end up there. But this is a time when I don't think it makes any sense to do anything but to say no. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Rusty, let's find Jan Siebert-Warman. Jan, you're up.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm Jan Siebert-Warmond, speaking on behalf of myself and my husband, Wes Warmond. Our mailing address is P.O. Box 778, Cannon Beach, Oregon, 97110. Dear Mayor and City Councilors, tonight we ask all of you to please uphold our Cannon Beach oceanfront setback rules and to deny the Roberts Appeal 21-02. The integrity of our Cannon Beach oceanfront setback rules is of vital importance to our community and needs to be respected and maintained. Thank you.
Thank you. At that, I'm going to ask the list if there's anybody that wants to speak as an opponent. If there are a bunch, I'm going to limit time, but I'm not seeing anybody. Okay, we'll move on to our staff response.
Now, I would like to just a few points here. We've heard from Mr. Stamp and Mr. Raskin continually say staff says. We've heard this continually throughout the process about the findings, the Planning Commission's findings, who held a separate hearing to bring back the findings to approve those findings. So these are from the Planning Commission. They were adopted by the Planning Commission. And so I'm not saying anything. These are from the Planning Commission. This is their decision. And I want to read this. The applicant continues to state in their letter of March 4, 2021, that they were required to design the access to their home to ODOT public road standards, and that at the City Council's request, the Roberts filed this application for a variance from the oceanfront setback, while stating that the city also requested the Roberts design their access applying private driveway standards. This characterization of the situation is not reflected in the record. The applicant has taken the possible suggested avenues that are open to all homeowners and stated them, and they continue to state them, as if the city has requested and suggested they make such, and encourage was what they said tonight, such applications. The Cannon Beach Municipal Code allows all property owners to apply for setback reductions, variances, amendments, and appeals, all of which must be evaluated against the Cannon Beach Municipal Code and state such as ODOT standards where necessary. Every homeowner must meet such standards, and the city never requests or suggests applicants file such applications. I wanted to go on record that the city does not encourage people to do any of this. And so we give them their alternatives. That's what we do as staff. And when they say that the Public Works Director contacted them to suggest things, that's not the case. And for that to be repeated and put into the record has been proven. We have not seen any evidence towards that. And then the third point I also wanted to state, they were talking about the geohazard system. They all simply stated in the findings is that the geohazard system that we have is a system that is predicated on a house that currently is not approved to that oceanfront setback line. So it's over the line. So you have a system that's already 25 feet out over the approved oceanfront setback line. So yes, that's what we're saying, that we don't know what a system looks like that's built to what we suggest the oceanfront setback standard line is, or what has been proven by the survey line. So that's what this planning commission findings state, is that in the record, what's under review and what's been suggested by Mr. Rondema is a system, but that system is built on a home that is currently not approved because it's beyond the oceanfront setback line. And those are just the points I wanted to clarify.
I'd like to add to that. I concur with what Jeff said. There was a statement made that the city council also encouraged them to come back and file and seek a variance, a setback reduction. I think it's probably attributed to a comment I made, in which I was merely questioning why in their first application, they went right straight to a building permit proposal without ever even looking at the oceanfront setback requirements, which most people, when they look at the land, they'd say, well, there's a restriction here. So I should first seek to remove that restriction or to reduce it. My question is, they just ignored it. Totally ignored the setback requirement and submitted to our building community development department a plan for a house. That was not an encouragement to go back and seek a variance. It was merely questioning their audacity to ignore it and make a proposal to build a house. So just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bill, do you have anything you need to add?
It's a minor point, but it is an important one for Cannon Beach. So I thought I'd just point out that the applicant's attorney indicated that the state had ownership of the dry sand area, and that's a little technicality, but that's not accurate. Under Thornton versus Hay and the Oregon Beach bill, to the extent someone is granted ownership, it extends to the extent of that ownership. It's just subject to what the Oregon Supreme Court called the doctrine of custom that allows public use of the dry sand area. There are very many places where the public does actually have ownership, but there is still ownership of the dry sand area within the city of Cannon Beach and in Oregon. And the state doesn't own all of that. It just has, the public has a right to access that. And that right to access is managed by the state of Oregon pursuant to a public trust.
Right, thank you, Bill. I wanted to ask you, did you hear anything that was inappropriate to the record?
I did not. I know there has been discussion, it was disputed below, and there was an effort to bring some evidence in about whether or not there ever was a house on the property. And I was keeping my ears open for that. And I didn't hear any new evidence. It's just the parties making their same assertions as below. One side says there was in fact a house. The other side said there wasn't.
Great, thank you. Anybody else have a question for Bill or Jeff?
Looks like Andrew Stamp has a.
Yeah, he's coming next, because that's my last question. Does the appellant or proponent wish to make additional statements? So Andrew.
Let's see if I'm unmuted here. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm not sure what's wrong with my video, but I guess that's okay. First of all, I thought I was a little surprised to hear a lot of Diana Turner's testimony seemed to have new evidence in it to me. And I thought the petition is definitely new evidence. That should be allowed into the record. But beyond that, I wanted to talk about the idea of 1,400 square foot homes being the 45th percentile. The approval criteria really don't ask to compare the lot size with the rest of the city. What it requires is a comparison within the RL zone. And we provided that analysis, and the average square footage of oceanfront houses that are subject to the oceanfront setback in the in the RL zone is 3,000 square feet. And of those lots that were developed after 1970, last 50 years, which is really kind of when modern development started under the comprehensive planning, those houses are 3,557 feet. Now, some of that size is made large because of the village character of Chapman Point, which has usually large lots. But even without those, you get to 2,600 square feet as the average dwelling size. Now, I don't know how any of that fits within a village character, but so I'm not sure why Will Rasmussen keeps talking about that. But because I think there's some pretty big homes in Cannon Beach, particularly, and they're getting bigger all the time.
Yeah.
So in any event, I don't think we're proposing a Chapman Point lot size. Those are 5,000, 4,000 square foot homes. We're just proposing a 2,700 square foot home. I think that's pretty medium. I'd call that medium size. So in any event, I think really in this case, I think the important thing for the city council to think about is balancing the interests of the parties. There's no other lot in Cannon Beach that has a 90 or almost a 90% reduction in the lot size. And, you know, think about this for a second. Think about your own lot that you live on and say to yourself, what if the government restricted my lot so I could only build on 13% of it, which is what we've got, 12.9%. Think about how big of a house you could build on your lot if you could only build on 13% of it. And think about how you would feel. I mean, really, that's what it comes down to. Would you be happy living on 13% of your lot? Now, if you got a 20,000 square foot lot, then maybe that you would. But for a lot that's only 5,394 feet, that's not a very big building envelope. And what makes this different than all the other houses in Cannon Beach is most of them, the development cost to build on that is very low because you got your lots on flat land. You know, here we're going to have to build a foundation system that probably costs more than the average home price of those 45th percentile lots. And that's what I mean by when I say economic return. You know, just the driveway alone is going to have to be carefully engineered to make sure it's safe, to make sure it's going to be usable. The foundation system, all the things that have to go into building on this lot means that there's going to be quite a bit of money invested even before one 2x4 is put a nail into it. And that's really what I was talking about when I said, you know, when you think about variances and hardships, you are allowed to consider those kind of financial hardships. You know, this to build on this lot is very expensive, and you know, it's appropriate for the city council to take that into account. So I won't belabor this issue anymore. I thank you for listening to us. I thank you for holding the hearing, and I request that you grant this variance. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And since Jay was a proponent, let's see if he wants to raise his hand for a comment. Jay, did you have something you wanted to add? Nope, can't hear you yet.
There we go.
There we go.
It's been interesting listening to both sides. It's hard to imagine we're actually talking about the same project. But I would point out that the house that I designed for the Roberts is only about 2,700 square feet. which is actually less than the neighbor's house, which is 3,000 square feet of house. And they have a 4,000 4,000 square feet in their basement. So in terms of scale, we're not very far off from what the neighbor's house and many other houses on the beachfront. So I'll leave it at that. I think that, thank you very much.
Thanks, Jay. Okay. We've closed the public hearing. Move for a tentative consideration. Okay, comments. I have to admit, I did the same thing you did, calculate my house.
Yeah, I immediately, based on that last comment, looked at, how would I feel? Well, I've occupied 9% of my 15,000 square feet. And why? Because I was limited by wetlands and by zoning code that I can only put one house on 15,000 square feet. So I don't have any sympathy for that.
I kind of did the same thing. I came up with 18% on my 4,000 square feet, simply because that was their normal setbacks. So I guess that relates to the fact that in most cases that we compare house to house, wherever they are in town, it's within what was allowed.
Let's not forget too, this hearing is not about the size of a home.
Yeah.
This hearing is about an oceanfront setback. And yet most of the argument's been about the hardship of living in only 27,000 square feet or 2,700 square feet. So the arguments are all over the place, but the application was for reduction in the oceanfront setback. And it seems to me that the Planning Commission spent many hours on this, as I have, in getting ready for this meeting, literally days looking at this, all the evidence. And all you really need to do is get down and address the oceanfront setback requirements and calculations. And all the rest of this is, in my view, is fluff to try to distort the real issue.
I also believe that the comp plan's village character is important. I agree with Mike that the ocean setback line is a line that needs attention, and we need to pay attention and maintain that for the reason it's there, the reason it was established, and the fact that the property owners knew that line was there, where they should have when they purchased it. The other part for me, and this is my peeve, I guess, in anything that happens within our community, is the village character aspect that we have maintained or tried to maintain throughout the fact that so many properties allow for larger homes. If we have the time machine and we could have gone back to the time when the lots and things were drawn out, nobody would have known that somebody would build 5,000 square feet on a 5,000 square foot lot. They would have fixed it, I think. Anyhow, that is almost doubly important when you start thinking about the beach and the relationship to the beach, which comes back to the oceanfront setback line. So some other notes, but I think we've kind of, Mike was saying, it's not, yeah, it's fluff because trying to dissuade or distract us from what's important. The view impact as a criteria for me is not that important. I remember on the planning commission, how many times we had people trying to look between a garage and a driveway, you know, and trees, and we're lucky to get 4 inches of view. And they were fighting for another inch. So I don't really feel sorry for the haystack folks if they lose a little bit, but that's just me. The important part, again, is the ocean setback line.
I realize this is about the ocean setback line, but I do have a question in terms of why we're even thinking about the size of a house when the property, Jeff, tell me if I'm wrong. It has no vehicular access to the property right now. We haven't even considered access points to the property yet, right?
Well, it hasn't been approved. We did a development permit when they first initially did it. Approval conditioned upon, and that was one of the conditions that was placed on it, that they would have to get that approved.
And is that going to have to be approved by the planning commission and or the city council?
You know, once the plans are submitted, I believe that if it's in the oceanfront management zone, then if it's a public roadway, then it has to be come for review. You know, that's my understanding of that.
Well, then are homes even allowed on a parcel that doesn't have any access to it?
So
that would go.
Bill?
If I can add, you know, there is an undeveloped roadway, Nenana Avenue, that this parcel fronts on. Under Oregon law, you know, they are entitled to use that. Now, the city has control as it controls the right of way to say what that looks like. But to the extent the city says, no, you cannot build anything there and you do not get access to this public right of way that's adjacent to your home, the city would have an issue with a potentially taking of property.
Okay. Well, that answers my question somewhat. Yeah.
Well, and I just think the Roberts have had very sophisticated, experienced people helping them make a plan. And this oceanfront setback has been in existence from 7 years before they purchased it. I know the architect is very familiar with Cannon Beach and how it works. And I just have difficulty understanding why this is a surprise or a challenge, because it's always been there.
Brandon, do you have any comments?
Yes, thank you, Sam. I'd like to just say that I agree with everything my fellow counselors have said. I agree with what the Planning Commission came up with in their decision, especially supporting housing policies 1 and 6. I also feel that the argument that the applicants are facing an undue financial hardship is, I just don't buy it. If you build a smaller home, you're going to spend less on that. I'm just not sure where that argument's going. But regardless, I'm in support of the Planning Commission's decision.
Okay, thank you. Unless there is any other comments, I just want to remind everybody that Jeff asked us to do this tentatively. If we deny or if we approve the appeal to the Planning Commission's findings, tentative to the written findings that we can double check. So.
Ready for a motion?
Sure.
I make a motion that the council deny the Roberts appeal to the Planning Commission's findings, and that this be tentative ruling dependent on the written findings of our staff that will be reviewed at the next available meeting.
Second.
Seconded. Any last comments on the motion? Okay, we have a motion for. If Jennifer's ready, we'll call the roll.
All right. Council McCarthy,
Yes.
Council President Benefield,
Yes.
sorry, Councilor Risley,
Yes.
Councilor Ogilvy,
Yes.
Mayor Stidel.
Yes. To deny has passed, so. Meeting, Jeff, I believe is the 18th is what we've scheduled.
Yes. I
Okay.
think.
Thank you all. We got through that.
Thank you, Bill.
Thanks, Bill.
Have a good evening.
Okay, next item. Will bring us back to speed here. Jennifer's ready. Okay. Access requirements to protect the city and watershed in the case of a wildfire. Bruce. Yes, sir.
Real quick, let's officially close that meeting and open a work session. That
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Let's officially close that meeting.
just to make sure we're good.
We will now open the work session with our next item. Bruce.
Thank you, sir. The recent update of the Cola Creek Forest Reserve Management Plan comes about at a time in which wildfires have devastated many Oregon and California communities. It's only natural that this increased awareness of the potential impacts on the city, our watershed, and the ECFR itself has resulted in staff and our local fire agencies taking a close look at our ability to contain or stop a wildfire starting in or approaching the ECFR. Specifically, staff's focusing on our responsibilities to protect the city from wildfire. And also, in our case, our source of water is in the ECFR. So when we're talking about what might be able to happen in the ECFR or the ability to slow or stop fires before they get close or get involved with our springs. So that's where our focus is. The city staff and its fire protection partners, they include Neil Bond from the Oregon Department of Fire, Mark Reckman, Chief of the Cannon Beach Rural Fire Department, Barry Sims, who has been working he's with Trout Mountain, and he's been working with the ECFR management plan since the beginning, Chad Washington of Greenwood Resources, and Rick Hudson of Cannon Beach. He's our emergency manager, and he was, prior to this time, he was battalion chief with Sacramento, California, and had a responsibility to deal with this type of a fire. The city staff and the fire protection partners have developed a plan that minimizes negative impacts to habitat to the degree possible, which still allows fire agencies to plan for getting their crews safely in, and more importantly, out of the mission critical areas of the ECFR. Without safe ingress and egress, these agencies will not assign their crews inside of the ECFR. And this was my biggest concern. During a wildfire scenario, that lack of safe, reliable access could force hard choices, such as allowing the fire to burn in the ECFR and plan to fight or stop the fire at US 101. So I want to talk about what is included in the plan. Rusty, if you bring up that map. I want to start at the south side and work my way up to the north. But this access here, you can see is partly inside of the ECFR. This is access from Warren Way and works its way in. So that's one of the 4 ways that with these particular roads that we're talking about, we actually have 4 accesses from different directions to access the ECFR. But this one has an area that needs to be brush cleaned out. There's not a lot of work to be done there. But the important thing is that you look at these 3 dots. Those are our 3 springs. And we really don't have a way to get close to them other than the road that comes up Elk Creek Road. So if we needed to get to those, to protect them, to protect the land around them, to protect the area from burning, so that we don't have damage to the springs, we can potentially approach now, if we were to go ahead and open this area, and from over here, because these are both about 1,300 feet away from the springs. That doesn't make it easy to protect the springs, but it makes it possible, because the trucks that will be going in from either the trucks from the fire district or from the Department of Fire or Department of Forestry, sorry, they carry 1,500 feet of line. So from this point, you could get potentially to this area to keep it wet, try to protect anything around it, or potentially from this road, you had the same scenario. And that is not an easy, it's not like, well, we're making this so easy for the firefighters. Each section of hose, which is about 300 feet, weighs 45 pounds. And that is about the same as when you have like those large bottles of water you bring into your house for the coolers. Those are about 40 pounds also. And the distance that we're looking at from here to here is about the same as a walk from First Street on Hemlock, I'm sorry, from Third, is it? And then all the way down to First. That's the distance that you would be, they have to carry that 40 pounds up and down hills. So to get them locations where they can actually achieve some sort of a, some sort of a firefighting activity, it's still not an ideal situation. And we're not asking more than what some of the existing roads are. I mean, it would be possible to try to get roads closer. We're not asking for that. The second one comes in from the Tolovana road system. This is a rock road that would need to be reestablished. And you see these red dots, we have them in a couple places. That's because every agency we talk to said we have to be able to get in, but more importantly, get out. And we don't back out. We go in, we turn around, and then we set ourselves up to be able to get out of there quickly if things go bad. So we have to have those locations. This particular road, when it goes in, gives us the possibility of finding another place along the power lines. And that's extremely important because when you look at the campfire, which is the one that devastated Paradise, California, that started in a power line 10 miles away. So we want to be able to access that. So with these points, this is about a quarter mile. This is about a quarter mile. This is a little bit more. This is about 2,000 feet or so that we would have accesses to that power line, which is, if there's going to be a major fire, that's likely to be where it would occur. I'd like to ask Karen and Rick and Chief Reckman to talk about an incident that happened this weekend or last weekend. So
yeah, I got some notes on that. Let me come up here, get a little bit closer to you here.
And this is just the idea of like, could something like this happen here? Well, we had it, but it was taken care of somehow.
The one thing that's important about this little incident that we're going to talk about is, believe it or not, what I'm going to discuss is fairly routine. It happens quite often on these power lines, and a lot of times, you don't hear about it, but it's relevant to what we're talking about now, and it just happened on Saturday, May 1st. You may or may not be aware of this, but Pacific Power, there was an incident and the fire chief was contacted at 10 a.m. with his duty phone. And he was called and somebody said there's something wrong with the power lines, and they gave him a location and he went to investigate it and he couldn't find anything. The location wasn't accurate for where that person was talking about. At 12:30, he had about 3 calls altogether, and that person was willing to wait at the scene for them and kind of guide him into what they were talking about. So at 12:30, he was able to kind of find the area that was going on, and he was able to contact Pacific Power and get them on the road to come out here and get to the location. And then he contacted the Public Works Director, Karen Labonte. By the time Pacific Power got on scene, and they came up with a plan, that plan was developed around 6:30 in the evening. And that plan was to replace the damaged insulators on that line. The location of this line is right around the Pacific Power's line, right up behind the Public Works yard, near the water treatment or near the water tank. And it's going to be right up around that location. The one thing that's interesting about what they tried to do there is they try to do what they call a hot repair, which is where they don't shut off the power and they do everything with lines being live. And they wanted to do this repair after midnight in order to reduce the impact on the community in case something did happen. So that also gave an opportunity for the Public Works and the fire department to come up with an action plan. So Public Works came up with an action plan. They got their generators in place. They notified their team. They notified the department heads of what they were doing. And they got all the generators in place and got everything going on. What happened after that is not routine. About 2 a.m., Pacific Power had to shut down the power lines to work on them because they were not able to keep the system running. And that was down for about 90 minutes. And so that bled over into Sunday. The interesting thing about that is that's the routine part. So when you look at the after action on this incident, let's look at the lessons learned. First of all, we identified that the system that's bringing us power is a non-loop system, and it was established in the 1950s. The insulators are one of the weak links in the system, and there's quite a few of them in our area that go right through between Highway 26 and to the location here at the Public Works Yard. We did have drastic improved communications with the fire department in the city, which enhanced our fire department and emergency response to our emergencies. The implementation of our Public Works emergency procedures were effective and improved over the past several years. And I've seen that myself just since the time we had the red flag warnings in 2020 to now, the communication and the ability to coordinate and collaborate is happened drastically. Another thing that was interesting is the access to the power lines in that location are very critical because it improved the response. So not only was the ability to have people in the area and quick awareness from the citizens, but it also got the fire department in there faster. It got the city staff up to speed up what was going, and it got Pacific Power to the location quickly. The most important thing to reflect on this as we come back and view this incident is this is a non-weather incident. This is a non-emergency incident. And we were lucky that there was no fire, there was no hot weather, there was no wind. But what we did learn was very important about how fragile that system is. And one of the reasons I'm talking to you moreover than the fire department or Karen Labonte are, my job is to identify the risk of this community. And so when I pull all this information together, we were fortunate enough to get in touch with Pacific Power and make some good plans in the near future. And that's for a different conversation.
Well, thanks, Rick.
Yep.
And I think to me, one of the main points is that this happened within a very short distance of the ECFR, and it was part of the power line system. And is it what, 50 or 70 years old, some of the transformers?
They were put in 1959.
Or they were put in 1959. And what they're talking about is going through and replacing some of the insulators. Yeah. But they're not going to do that for another year or two. But anyway, can something happen in this area? Yeah, we have a very old power line components. And fortunately, nothing happened more than that. Although I think there was some arcing within the system, but inside of the transformer. But anyway, so now that's the importance of being able to go ahead and get the access in multiple locations. So this adds another location that we can get to. This also gives us a second location where we can enter from the Tolivana road system. The third would come off of the Volmer road system. And this comes down, this is a, what was that? How did they? This road has light rock, and then it gets down to where it's dirt. And this is an area that it's going to be, well, there's probably more of an environmental concern in this area. And we would have to make sure that everything was done as best as possible. And for that work to move forward, what we're talking about is having the plans done by Trout Mountain, that's Barry Sims and his folks, and have subcontractors and contractors that work for Greenwood that know how to build roads, know how to do environmental restorations, that sort of thing. So this one is going to be the most difficult probably to implement. It's also, you can see it's extremely important because this is about a quarter mile. So this distance from here to here is probably a half mile. And I told you, you're carrying 40 pounds over those kind of distances. So this would give us, again, and this would also be another location to access those lines. This area is steep enough that this is mostly accessible by ATVs. So again, we want to try to get a midpoint in there. The restoration of the access roads as shown on that map is the minimum recommended by our firefighting partners. Compromises have been made. There are other road locations that might have been helpful, but are not being requested by staff. It's also important to note these roads can and will be used to create fire breaks if necessary. For that reason, they will be constructed to a minimum of 14 to 16 feet wide where possible. And you can see how we have, can never tell where this thing is going. You clearly have the area of the West Fork and the North Fork, all those come together. That's going to be a natural break. This will be a break. I don't know how much of a break this one would be, but those are all important because they can use those to just pre-plan and try to stop the fire. As I mentioned earlier, all the road and habitat design work, as well as the site inspections during construction, will be contracted through Trout Mountain. We intend to have the road work, including road decommissioning, to be done by Greenwood Resource subcontractors. We will contract with Greenwood to accomplish the construction. I also want to mention that like this road in here has a culvert that's failed, and there's another one also someplace in here, but we intend, when we do this work, to take out the old culverts, put in new culverts in those locations. And in addition, we're looking at locations in the entire ECFR. And it'll probably take a little bit of time to do that, to properly decommission roads. Because we have roads that, because of the culverts that have failed, are carrying sediment down to the creek. And there's ways to stop that from happening. There's also subtle grade changes you can make so that the decommissioned roads aren't creating erosion in some other ways. So we're looking at all of this work being important, some of it to go ahead and allow us to be able to get access to deal with fires, but also other work that is important and that's been on the plans for a while to improve conditions in the ECFR. We see how all of these things go together. So the strong recommendation is for council to provide direction to staff to include the fire protection plan maps as presented in the ECFR update, and to grant the resources and put improvements in place and budget to make it happen. If you provide the direction, then staff is ready to move forward with taking the ECFR update to OWEB, which is the next step. And that's our plan. Are there any questions?
Bruce, is OWEB on the line?
No.
Okay, because in our minutes that we had for April 6th, it says, I hope we will have opportunity for OWEB to talk to council about what that grant means. St. Dennis replied, we might be able to do sooner, but we may have someone on the phone from OWEB when we do presentation at the May. It should be work session, not workshop. If you have a specific question, we can email and ask to respond in writing. Risley replied, I want to focus in on where they are coming from. Benefield added it would be good having them on Zoom for that meeting. We were told they would be here.
Okay, that's my error. And tonight, what we were talking about or focusing on is that the staff has a presentation for something to be included that would be submitted to OWEB, as does the Parks Committee. And so I was trying to get to the point that we actually had something that the council had approved, and then deal, going through the OWEB.
Well, that's not what it says here.
Okay.
We're going to be part of the conversation today.
That was my original intention, yes. Subsequent to that, we've had several meetings with the Parks Committee, and we just wanted to get the information to the council from the Parks Committee.
You can't keep controlling it like this. It should be driven by the council, and this was the request.
I understand what you're saying, Robin. And I guess that in my mind, there were things to be accomplished along the way.
And that it overrides what we've asked for?
No, because you would.
Okay, well, from now on, I'd like it to be taken properly.
Okay.
Also, I have a question about the big issue, which is the power lines. And I know that this is a bigger issue than just Cannon Beach, so it would require collaboration with the county. And I think it should be something that we would work on as an infrastructure project to replace. Because I feel that that's a huge issue. And if we could get all of the lines properly updated, we would not have to be so concerned about a lot of what these roads are going to do to the property. And then you talked about a minimum of 14 to 16 feet.
Yes.
What's the maximum? I would like to see maximum 14 to 16 feet.
Yeah, there's no reason to make it wider than that.
Then let's say that.
Okay, we can say that.
And when you talk about the budget, what are you proposing? Do you have a number? Because it just says budget to make it happen.
The proposed budget that you'll be reviewing tomorrow has $70,000 for work in ECFR. I don't know if that'll be enough to complete everything, but we have gotten proposals for certain parts of the road, but I don't think that all of the questions are answered with the proposals that we've had. The information, the direction that we get from council will refine that. And so, but right now there's $70,000 included to hopefully put the roads in place and have money left over to be able to do the decommissioning. And when we're talking about road installation, where required, that also includes culvert replacement.
And is that necessary to replace all the culverts? I think some of them have decomposed enough that it's not necessary.
The conversation, well, yes, we've not done a detailed look at it, but I was told there's at least 2 culverts that are associated with these roads that would need to be replaced. There are also culverts that, may need to be taken out as a result of decommissioning. And I don't know what the details are.
Proper decommission would take out the culverts and create the stream into a natural form. But that's on the decommissioned roads. So the ones that would be replaced are only on the ones that are.
And there are only 2.
Sounds like there's only 2.
Okay.
And Robin, that's what we know at this point.
I would think if we go into a decommissioning mode for as much as possible, we'd have Barry doing most of the research, trying to find out where things are. And
I would plan on using him as the consultant for all the work.
yeah, we always have it, but again, finding where the roads are needing current or the most urgent action. would be those areas around where culverts.
Can you
would fail.
point out where the culverts are on the map? Are they on
It looks like.
the roads? that
I'm looking
were-
at the county map here, and it looks like there's a culvert.
I think there's a culvert that's failed someplace along here.
Yeah, it's on that flat stretch right above K. There's a gully right in there. It looks like there's two areas that it could be very easily to have a culvert there. It's that switchback on the upper part.
Up here?
No, right above K.
Mhm.
So those two areas, to me,
So that's two culverts
I
there.
would think.
Okay.
But again, I'm not gonna say because I haven't been up in that area for a long time. I've been up the Tulare Road system and up the Warren system. I've not been on that little spur.
Is Barry on the line?
No, he was not able to make it tonight.
Yeah. So.
Because he would know.
And that would be part of the process of when he finds those things, he'll bring it to us and say, this is what we want to do. So I'm enthusiastic about the road decommissioning, just because of the debris that's sitting in the creek. Kind of natural, but it's also man-made. So I don't know, that part is important. I'm a little concerned, and this is probably more to ask Rick or Mark, that northern section that is what the bigger of the two camel bumps up on top, not the road, the whole property, right up in that whole area is so dense. And that's part of the area where Barry was originally going to do some thinning.
And then the lumber was not.
Well, that's actually too small to even lumber. It's just so freaking dense. And again, that's a whole nother research program, but access to that is going to be important for the folks thinning.
Did you listen to the meeting that had Barry and, all the fire experts there? They did bring that up, that northern section. But my sense was they were more interested in having it as an observation point for seeing a high point to look over the whole area rather than an immediate concern for access for firefighting. Well, they said that area is growing up and that will become a concern later. That, at least the way I recall the meeting I listened in on. By the way, I thought that meeting was outstanding. It was long, but it had a lot of people with a lot of expertise making their recommendation and not just recommendation, but their discussion and dialogue back and forth. And I think they came to some pretty darn good plans. As it turns out, are very close to what the Parks Committee was proposing in the ECFR 5-year update. So I think it's very close. There's some nuances. Matter of fact, I think the fire group, the staff actually moved that north road back a little ways to keep it out of the riparian wetlands, back further than what the
But I don't
Committee
think
said.
the third road was discussed
No.
until Friday.
I
And I'd like to have a little more knowledge about that.
That was brought up by Barry. And he said that that road would require very little work. You'd have to clean out blackberries, that sort of thing. But it gave us the access from another side to be able to get to the springs.
thing that they comment on, now you're on both sides of the spring. If something happens there, you gotta go way clear around, long distance. And the road is essentially there, only needing clean out. I mean, maybe Rick has a different. Or
No, those guys brought the opinion to us and it's a smart thing to fix. And I've never been on that road, so I didn't have familiarity with it, but Barry did, and he's the one who brought it up, and it makes perfect sense to be able to get to both sides of the springs.
And I think at this point, we're looking for some consensus from council to say, yes, we like the plan being presented by staff with the considerations and a budget to be established. There will be many more detailed discussions, even on that little stub road on the south. Once staff people get in there and take a look at it. Barry says it makes sense. It's just a clean out to take care of it. I like the fact that it gets on the other side of our springs to protect that old growth area and the springs for more erosion and silt buildup. So I think Barry brought it up and it makes a lot of sense to do it. It'll require more study. I shouldn't say more study, detailed, not just more meetings. But I guess I feel it looks like a very good plan. And I think I wouldn't call it a compromise with what the Parks Committee proposed. I see it as a refinement and an adaptation with many of the recommendations they made, but I felt good that two things. One is the staff report concurred. We don't want any loops. We don't want interconnecting networking of roads. And this doesn't do that. I mean, this addresses that. It also backed it out of the riparian wetlands up there on the north side. So I guess all I'm saying is I think it's a good plan and got to move forward, but with a periodic review before any physical work is done. I ought to come back with a detail. This is what we're proposing. This is the budget, and bring that back to the council. Obviously, this plan has got to go to OWEB and say, this is what we're proposing. Give us your feedback. We'll make any changes that you feel we've got to make and get their blessing. I think we're obligated to do that.
Oh, yeah.
My reading of the grant. So anyway.
Well, and just a reminder that the public wouldn't be in the reserve. They would only be able to drive on the exterior and not be able to
they're
into it.
proposing lots of gates and signage.
Yeah, 3, isn't it?
I think, well, one for each one of the road access points.
One already exists. The main road coming down from the Talabana line, that already exists as a gate right there. It's functional. And we just have to add 2, one off the Volmer track and one off the Warren track.
Yeah, I'm looking here. The Warren track is only on the property for about 800 feet.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it's a real short spur.
Sam, I think I appreciate y'all listening to the staff presentation. I think you should hear from the Parks Committee also.
Yep.
I wasn't intending that to be the end of the presentation.
Elaine here
She's on
online.
So, yes, and several other members. And we did, Jen, we did advertise this.
Yes,
So
advertise it as a Parks Committee.
yeah, this is a Parks Committee meeting and a council meeting so that they can speak.
Auditor.
Hello, this is Jelaine. Thank you.
Jelaine.
Setup. Hi, thanks. Yes, well, I certainly would be happy to answer any questions. However, I would also, if I can share my screen, I'd like to just touch on a couple of things. There were some of the discussion here was related to questions about culverts, about what the terrain is like at certain sections of the trail. And actually we have a direct experience and familiarity with both of these routes all the way along. So can speak to any questions that council may have about that, because we've had eyes on all the way along. I think staff has presented where they are, and in the proposal that you see from staff tonight, I think Robin mentioned the committee saw that for the first time late last week. we had been working with the initial proposed roads that staff had given us at the March 18th meeting, and that was a proposal for 2 roads, and they're largely similar. But the map that you have from the committee in your packet, and is it possible for me to share my screen? Is that something I can do?
Yes.
Okay, I'm not technically super great here, but I'm going to see if I can do this. So if I share my screen and I make this bigger, oops, I have to make this smaller again. I go desktop, and then do I have to hit share again after that? That is my question. I want to show you another map. There we go. Okay, I think I got it now. All right. And this is the map. Are you guys seeing that?
Yes.
Great. Okay. This is the map that you have in your packet from the committee. And that is because what we're representing here is we responded to the initial proposal from staff. They had a map where they referred to the roads as Road A and Road B. There was a green line and a red line. And so those are the references that you see in our recommendations and our draft recommendations. I understanding that we understood from a communication shortly after the March 18th meeting that there would be nothing else that staff would be bringing to council regarding the roads. So that's what we've responded to. And as has been mentioned, great news in the staff report and map that we received was presented to us just this last Friday morning, so a couple days ago. We saw that the terminus had been changed from far past the power lines, where this was the original staff proposed road, and they've moved it back to the power line, which is great. That moves us much closer into alignment. And likewise on this red road, rather than taking it right down through the wetland, they brought that back to the power line also. So now this one, which was the red, it is the red line on our materials. It was called Road A before. It is now being called the Tolovana Road System as of Friday. We agree on the on this road route. So that's great. And the addition of the third road, which I will see if I can get this. Here we go. So this is that same map here. And this is the spur road. This is the upper section that has been rocked. It is really quite open and drivable. If in an emergency, that is a much more passable section. As you get down here, I think Bruce said he thinks it turns into dirt road. It actually transitions radically at this point. And the reason I put this black line here alongside the dotted line is that it moves from a previously rocked road into a trail. So the only piece that we're talking about here is this one with the dotted line. And we're going to just need a little bit more time as a committee. We think one more meeting probably to just be able to incorporate both this new road, the third one, and to update the names of the roads, get the terminus points the same, and then to see if there's anything that we need to speak to around this part, because it is a very different environment and it's a very different situation, the upper road from this lower section. But the good news is that the new staff proposal brings us closer into alignment on these 2 roads. We'll take a look at this and see if we have anything further to add to that, but we do want to incorporate that into our materials because we didn't have a chance to do that. We anticipate that really the majority of the recommendations that you have in your packet, with the exception of what I've just talked about, will stay the same. We were able to touch on each of those recommendations of the committee with staff on Friday. And with the exception of that one piece that I talked here that we're just going to do a little more discussion on, the staff said that they wouldn't have issue with any of the other recommendations. So that's good news going forward also. I would like to take any questions that you have. Oh, and just another mention about these 2 maps. We've been using this map because it's so very useful in terms of looking at the forest types. This shows the different forest types. This is all riparian, floodplain, wetland, forest, hardwood forest, which has a much lower risk for fire, we learned, than the conifer forest, which is the dark green. So fire risk is very important. We certainly acknowledge that we need to have a balance here. But when we're looking at this, you know, the gray map here, it just doesn't show the level of detail and nuance in terms of relative fire risk, what we're looking at and what will be required, as well as the potentially ancillary effects of having more access in the ECFR. So a lot of good news here. There's a lot of overlap, and I want to stop now and take any questions that you might have, and specific to the routes, because we've had eyes on the routes all the way along and can speak to that. I'll stop sharing my screen now, unless it would be helpful to keep looking at this map. But
I do have a question on your recommendation 9.
Yeah.
In the end, one of the last sentences, it says any road maintained for the purpose of preventing fire in the reserve may not be connected to other existing or abandoned roads in or out of the reserve. But those roads are connected because you have to get in and out of the reserve. So I guess I'm not sure what you mean by that.
That was really speaking to the networking issue and to any possible use of these roads for evacuation routes from the city, or you know, future idea that they could be used as emergency evacuation routes. So the issue of networking is important, not connecting up either existing or old roads, or these roads that would be used for fire suppression, but that they're not start to be kind of a creeping network of roads in the ECFR. That's really what that was referring to.
You might want to reword that a little bit. I know you talk about evacuation routes at the sentence before that, but it's just an odd sentence because, I mean, it has to connect somewhere. They have to go in and out.
Oh, I see. Right. Yeah. So we can clarify that. So it's clear that it's just not networking it to other roads to create a connection inside the reserve. So yeah, thank you for that. Well,
Everything is proposed is a dead end.
No, that's the problem.
Well, I know, but that's, again, we're not trying to go farther than what we need to do. We wanted to get to the power lines, and we're able to do that in several. There's a turnaround to be able to get back out.
Yeah.
And so we avoided, I mean, there might be opportunities that, you know, you say, okay, in an ideal situation, we would have this. We're not looking for that. We're looking for what we can do with what we have and work within the easement.
Yeah, that's great. And I think just to add a quick note on that, I think part of what we're talking about, because as a committee, we are looking at the entire ECFR stewardship plan, that material that we submitted to you in January. This issue of roads is a part of that, but we are always looking ahead. We're looking to the bigger picture. We're looking to the implications of recommendations going forward and how that could affect the entire system of the ECFR in more than just the fire roads capacity. So I appreciate that staff is asking for a very specific thing here and not implying networking, but we're also, as we're expanding the discussion of roads, we wanted to address that also because we're trying to look ahead, to be clear.
I would, in the same area here, I understand and I agree with the whole idea of not creating loops and connected roads. But I would remove the sentence about emergency evacuation, because that could be an absolute necessity given an unknown, and that's what the whole word emergency means. So that's irrelevant. If we're in a situation where there's no other way out, we're going through the woods.
Yeah, I think that, oh, I'm sorry, excuse me.
No, I would just, that doesn't relate to the fact that you don't want to have a connectivity within the road system that is only 3 roads. So well, it's actually 4 because you got the original road.
Well, I think again, looking ahead, I appreciate your point. the idea here was that there, of course, is always emergency planning going on. There are natural hazards mitigation plans that refer to sending people eastward. They actually name the neighboring properties in ECFR in terms of, you know, the lands that are east of the city. So what we wanted to do here is to clarify that for emergency planning purposes, and again, looking ahead, that it not be seen as, hey, you know, there are these roads here, we could use them for evacuation routes. Because I think it would be really inadvisable in a number of ways to be sending people up into the ECFR or developing routes that could double as evacuation routes from the city. That would certainly violate I believe the OWEB agreement. And so we just wanted to clarify the purpose of these roads, as we said in the introduction, needs to be very specific, their purpose, the limits on them. And then, you know, if we need to clarify that it's really about the emergency planning or planning evacuation routes into the ECFR, understanding that in an emergency, that would be an emergency. Does that help clarify?
Not really. I can understand not designating roads in any sort of mitigation aspect. But in an emergency, the OWEB agreement is out the window. So you're going to go through the woods no matter what. So there's no reason to put emergency plans will direct public, you know, there's no reason for that. If you want to say that in the mitigation type wording, you don't want connectivity within those roads, that's fine. I mean, that works for any of the kind of plan contingency aspect of an emergency operations plan or even a mitigation plan or anything like that. That's fine. But just let you know that in an emergency, if you get a truck that can drive across the creek, they're going to drive across the creek.
Yeah. And I think it goes back to a conversation that we had a year ago at a Parks meeting that it's also referenced in as one of the references, where we just brought this up with staff, and staff assured us that, you know, the emergency planning that the city does is going to direct people around the ECFR, not direct people into the ECFR. And then understanding that, so it was really echoing that that's an understanding that we had from staff, and that we clarified that in a previous roads discussion, and that planning that the city does for emergency evacuation will direct people around the ECFR rather than through it. And then, of course, in the moment, we do the best we can. So that was the intention.
I would also just add that logically, there's no real reason to go through the ECFR. It's not the best road system.
No.
Tolavana is better. Volmer works, but it just gets you back around to 101, and that's not that great. I guess it gets you to 26, but Tolavana is still the best system. And I agree. So, but there's, you know, there are always instances.
I guess the way I read that 0.9 is any networking of roads within the ECFR or development of roads to provide evacuation to the city should be prohibited.
Yeah.
What I see it saying is don't build roads specifically for the evacuation of the city.
Yes.
And I would agree with that.
Yeah.
It doesn't say you're going to be fined if you, in an emergency, you evacuate and you go through that.
Yeah.
So, and I think the way it's worded right now, it seems to imply that maybe you'd add the word specifically, you know, the development of roads specifically to provide evacuation. I think that's what you're trying to address. You don't want to build the roads for evacuation. You're building the roads that are there. You're going to maintain them for fire. Okay.
Exactly. So thank you. Yes, that's exactly the intent there. And that was, you know, again, looking ahead, because, you know, we're writing a plan for people who may not be sitting in this room right now. And so we want to be as clear as we can be about the intention of any of these actions so that people will be able to move ahead accordingly with the needs of the moment. So thank you, Counselor. That is the intention with that.
I want to address one other point as soon as I find it. That lower section of the Volmer area.
Yeah.
Yes, it is a trail now because it has just not been maintained at all. But it originally was cut and rocked as a road. So there is road in there. And so how to upgrade it, I don't know. I'm not the engineer. But it's clearly visible in the LiDAR maps as a substantial road. There is one section that I would really address, Bruce, because it looks like there's a slide that has happened. So that's just going to be a challenge.
And I think
it also goes down to the bottom, actually shows, it looks like a loading deck that is big. So turning around shouldn't be a problem.
We use whatever's there to the degree that we can.
Yeah.
It broadens out further down. It's all very grassy. It's still very trail-like. It's very, very, very wet. It's a floodplain and it's very wet. It's very marshy. But it does flatten out and open up a little bit further down. It's that first part of dotted line from where it goes from solid line to dotted line. That is where, and I believe there's a culvert there also. That was one of the ones that Barry was talking about. And tributary crosses the proposed route. I think that's where the culvert had failed. But it is a very narrow, it's like a one-person footpath narrow, and the rest is grown up. It's riparian forest, it's alder forest down there. So it is not the same. I think this just to reinforce that proposed route covers lots of different kinds of territory. It's very, very different at the top. And the tour that staff provided to the Parks Committee was, I think, it provided a single view from above that looked right down the power line corridor. That's a really useful view to have, but it doesn't actually take you down the actual road that's being proposed to see how it is. So it's just very variable. And I think OL will probably weigh in on the sensitivity of that area and then how that can be addressed if that's something that the city wants to go forward with. But it's important for them to know what the differences are in what's being assessed here. And I think the line on the gray map doesn't really reveal that quite as fully.
Yeah, when you do a presentation, make sure you use the LiDAR map because it's a much better map. The county LiDAR map. Yes. Really impressive.
Hard for me to find it, but I did find it.
It'll take a while. Okay. So I would, sounds like we're in a relatively good spot to present, put something together.
Yeah. And we would really appreciate the opportunity to update our materials because, as I said, we've just had a couple of days. Some of the recommendations that we had made, road decommissioning, the change in the terminus routes of the roads, the city has included in both their discussion tonight and in their new map. So we'd like to update our materials. Address that one question so that we can see where we end up there. And then if we could come back at the very beginning of June, I think we're just going to need one more discussion to do that. It'll give us time to get our materials updated and then we can bring them to you with our final recommendations. As this would be an addendum to the ECFR stewardship plan update, and we would present it as such, I think, as the addendum for the roads to accompany the materials that we gave you in January.
Rick, do we have any concern for this summer that we would want to have these in place by summer?
I think for sure. Right now, you're talking about the driest April and May on record. And National Weather Service will be doing a webinar this Thursday to talk about that. They're already modifying the state's map on the drought conditions and fire conditions coming up this summer. That's why there's no time to really not consider this as a very, very important part of what we're dealing with climate change.
Yeah, and obviously the Tolovana route, the middle road, is reasonable now.
Yes, it's drivable now. It's being used for maintenance for the power lines, and there are truck tracks all along it, the entire route. So it's very drivable.
And the southern one is probably just as easy. It's the northern one that's going to take some time.
Yeah, and our goal is to follow Barry Sims' recommendations on exactly how to do that and study that and go with that proposal.
Yeah, I'm just concerned that we try and get at least what we need to do for Tolovana as soon as possible. If that is minimal, great. If it takes some effort, so we can have that by the summer. So I guess I'm feeling a little urgency to this. And I would like to push it.
And I'm just trying to think that through, Sam. Let us talk to Barry and Chad from Greenwood Resources to get an idea of what it would take to do those things, and then bring that back to you, because we don't have a budget for that at this point. We have money we can transfer, but we don't have money in parks to be able to handle this.
Okay.
But I mean, we can do that in a short time. I understand what you're saying.
Hey, let me just clarify for myself, maybe it's my misunderstanding, but I see this is the Parks Committee is making a recommendation to the city council. That's who they report to. Staff is making a recommendation to city council. It's very close, but there's some details that are different. The council needs to then, I think, direct staff to put it together, submit it to OWEB for approval or revision. Is that my understanding correct? Okay. All right. Just want to make sure.
Yeah, just to clarify, the Parks Committee was tasked with updating the ECFR stewardship plan, and that's what we've been working on for several years, that process. And this roads discussion, it was not brought to the committee directly. It actually came to council after we had submitted our materials to you. So I think that's where we got into the dual, the two tracks of proposals. But this did originate with the Parks Committee's work and the ECFR plan. And what I think we can do between now and June 1st is bring you one recommendation from the Parks Committee, and then it will be much clearer if there's anything additional, any outliers from the staff proposal. I don't know, because we just need to have one more conversation about that. But I think it will be much clearer once we get all these in alignment.
I think we've been difficult, but I think we have a much better document. And I'm glad to see that we've incorporated the fire safety as part of this stewardship plan. There's hardly been any discussion lately. We did just review the draft early, and I think there was a consensus that all the rest of the sections were very well done and very acceptable. I think now we have a emergency fire safety section that is also going to be very acceptable.
Thank you.
Is that enough direction, Bruce, or do you need something else?
As I understand it, the direction is to wait until the June meeting and then hear from the Parks Committee. And at that time, council will give direction as to what the final language and the update will be, and then proceed with working with OWEB.
The only thing I would go is to go ahead and advise Barry that we're heading this way so he can start doing some research and stuff.
Yes, we can do that too.
That way we're a little bit ahead of the game when we get there. And the other thing is when we tell OWEB what we're planning, be be aware of the fact that there might be some changes. But I think this is a necessary movement forward. So I guess that's all we need. Okay. Okay, let me figure out where I'm at here and get back to this.
Oh, a non-controversial topic.
Yeah.
I'm going to sign off, but I just want to thank the council members and staff very much. So I appreciate the opportunity to clarify, and we'll look forward to seeing you in June. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you.
Yeah, we saved the easier ones for last.
When we get through with, when we get past this, there's a whole nother question I'd love to send OWEB, but that's another topic down the road.
Okay. Just
Next item.
something else you want to put on, just let us know and we'll, so we can get it scheduled. You can see they're getting all pretty heavy right now.
Next item is, City Hall. Police station update. What you got?
You have the information in your agenda packet. You had asked about past discussions, or not, actually you hadn't asked about past discussions. You asked for about pros and cons, and then found that we'd had that discussion, and in fact had a PowerPoint that was pretty thorough. And so we included that in the materials.
Found it interesting to run into stuff that we've done and go through it and realize that there's enough change just in this time period, the year plus, to me, merit another pro and con process. But it did have some points that I thought were pertinent.
This line, Sam, one of the things, because this was early on when we were looking at multiple sites on this site and all that. I don't know if we ever went through a process to say, well, we're going to eliminate this one. So without that, we're kind of looking at many, some of which I think may have been discounted by now.
Yeah, there's a few that have been discounted. As far as I'm concerned, and I think we all might have different considerations on which ones are which, but I've been doing a lot of thinking about this, so I don't know. I want to hear from it. I want to hear from everybody else first. I did not attend the vetting committee meetings, and so I had read the minutes a long time ago, but to reread them was interesting.
Getting late, but
Starting to get late.
One of the things that came out of discussion before, one of the many things, one was, again, separating City Hall from the police department. I think it was one of the recommendations of the vetting committee. Here's just a thought that occurred, and maybe nobody likes it, but at least think about it. If we were to build this police department up here on the gravel lot, not ideal, but it can be done immediately. We could start that process. The food and beverage tax that we could do immediately, start building a police department immediately, and reduce the size of a potential bond that would be necessary to build a city hall, would reduce the amount of traffic that would be impacting any of the city hall sites that are still remaining. And therefore reduce some of the citizen opposition to the location because of traffic by moving the department to a separate location. Not ideal, but it seems to me that in my view, there's really just two viable city hall emergency operation center sites, and that's the RV park and Spruce Street. And we can argue and rational, discuss that and make a commitment while a police station is being built. And I know there's advantages to doing them all together. There's advantages to selling it all together. Is that maybe the citizens say, oh, we got a police department, we don't care about city hall. That's a risk. There's a risk that nothing gets done because it's too big a chunk. But I think that we would have a good argument to fund a police department and a fire department with a food and beverage tax, because most of that's going to serve, like 70% is serving the visitors to our community. And I don't see anything wrong with using visitor money to be on the debt on the police station. And we need that worse than anything else. I'd hate to see that held up while we continue to harangue and back and forth and make a non-decision because we can't decide on a site for City Hall. So anyway, just ask you to kind of think about that. A two-story building back here on the east lot with sort of expendable lower level, store your, your police garage, all the lifeguard equipment, the farmer's market, all those things, and come to think of farmer's market. When this is eventually removed, we got more parking and larger space for farmer's market. So I see, and by having the police and garage here, you have much more direct access for HRAP, the lifeguards, over to Gower Street and the beach access. I see some real advantages there. Too bad it's not higher elevation than it is, but some of that can be mitigated. And it's just Jason. Anyway, that's kind of where I've come around looking at all this information that we've kicked around over and over and over. And I'm willing to take the City Hall fight for later once we get started on, not later, not after we get a police department, but make that decision for the police department, food and beverage tax, while we continue to assess the feasibility of the sites for a City Hall.
One thing, Mike, on that is that what I'm hoping can happen if we do get the food and beverage tax is that it would generate enough to pay the debt service on the City Hall and a police station.
Right.
And if I understand what you're proposing is that the food and beverage from the city side would pay for a police station, but we would still have to tax residents for the City Hall. I see that the food and beverage gives you the opportunity to pay the debt service on both.
And it may very well. And if it does, we don't have to go out for a bond on City Hall. But we don't know that answer yet. And I don't know if we can know it in advance without some experience. That's the advantage. And if we start it right away and we know that there's going to be enough for police department, and if we are successful and collect more, then it would go towards City Hall, which may eliminate the need for a bond measure. It would certainly reduce the amount of a bond measure. So anyway, kick those ideas around.
It is an idea, and actually it's a new one, but it's kind of an upgrade from just doing a portable back there. So I agree. I think that would be a better facility to establish. It would be something that while that is then operational and we can expand and harden this a little better, we then take the discussion to Southwind or other areas to, we have time. I guess this time is what we're looking for. And I agree with that. That's a new direction.
Yeah, I like too that it would both serve emergency situations. I mean, the police station sort of fits more into that, and the fire does too. So it's a more compatible request. I think that the public might understand better.
I would start to get a little hesitant when we start talking about a 2-story building that survives the second story. That would need a little more research just to see, because well, when we talked about that before for the entire city hall, what was it called? Sounding evacuation bill, TEB. There was challenges that made it more expensive. And so we just need to look what those are again.
And there's a whole issue of survivability or still operational.
Yeah.
You know, those costs.
Yeah,
You have to make those trade-offs.
Just, that's one, and that's what I need to hear, because this is a new idea to add to my list, because I have 11. And what I did was, just sort out what are the options that we have with the properties that we have. And so I came up with 11. Obviously, they're not all good ideas, but they were just the options. This is a new one.
Well, I kind of like the idea to something to explore for sure. It does take care of the problem of needing a police station as soon as possible. And if we pay for it through the food and beverage tax, that relieves the property owners of having to pay a tax for that. And it does give us a little breathing room to continue discussion at the city hall, although I do want to see a city hall constructed as soon as we can do it. But that at least takes care of the police department situation.
And the food and beverage tax is a valid discussion, because that really ups the ante of what we might be able to do in the future. But it also adds time, because we've got to get it in action and then let it establish some funding and find out and get some education down. And I'm almost to the point where saying what Mike is putting forward is phase 1. But we still need to start planning phase 2 to 7 or 2 to 11 or 2 to whatever, so that we know where we're going down the road. And what would happen to this building, and what would happen to other aspects that we could help move forward with the food and beverage tax, if that brings in as much as we hope it does.
Well, and it was
When are we going to have that meeting?
budget meeting that we start setting aside some money for City Hall to show our sincerity and thinking that it's an important thing to do. And I like that.
I totally agree. I have no problem with setting aside money, and that's how we've always done it, and that's how we need to do it.
The public would appreciate it.
Yeah, and that shows some commitment also, but it's a drop in the bucket when it compares to what we're hearing as the potential for the
Right.
beverage tax.
But just to show the,
Yeah. And the sooner we start doing that, the better,
Mhm.
because we're not committed to the food and beverage tax.
right,
If,
I mean, the public will be making that decision.
yeah. I guess the question that I wanted to hear tonight is we still need to kind of redo the pros and cons. The one Mike just added, a couple others that we have, I think would be a good idea just to throw those out so that we know where each other is kind of leaning. I think that will help. I have thoughts about this, and we've got some already established, but I think we need to look at it in the new light of what could be happening down the road and with the facilities that we've got. And I'm just asking you, how would you like to do this?
I think this was helpful, just to refresh. We did a year, 2 years ago. I'd like to see that we maybe pull out our own documents of what our views were, take a new look at the other alternatives, come back together in a real work session with nothing else on the agenda. And hash some of these out and eliminate some of the 11 options.
12.
We can eliminate each other.
And that's
that may be a way to do it. But it was interesting to me too, Sam, to go back through a stack of stuff we looked at and look at the arguments, the pros and cons. And I don't know anything other than this new idea that kind of jumped out at me, which is piece and parcel to several of the other plans. But God, I can't believe I'd be recommending another damn meeting.
Oh, why not?
Yeah, why not? But yeah, it's got to happen soon, or we're losing millions of dollars by doing nothing.
Okay.
Does Brandon have any idea?
Hey, Brandon, are you awake?
I am. We actually had discussed this at the last time we were discussing this, building the police station back to the as far east as possible. I fully lend my support to it. I'll go ahead and reiterate it, that I'd be more than happy to support the city hall being built on its current location. I know that's maybe not the popular opinion amongst the council, but it's still mine, and it only reinforces it by looking at our pros and cons.
Okay, yeah, and it's on my list. So the only real rub with building in this location is the inundation zone issue.
Oh, the darn ocean.
Yeah, so
I will not refute that at all. This is just based on the location and what I feel would be the best location in terms of the service to the community.
yeah. And I'll just throw in from what I was reading and trying to remember where I was at when we were talking about some of these. I still like the idea of splitting up operations so that we have something on high ground that can serve as city hall when this one gets washed away. And again, that's only in the big one. 80% of the time it's not going to get washed away. But if the big one happens, we have a facility that would work somewhere else. Now, we've already kind of started, we could sort of function out of Public Works. We got an EOC. It's not a full city function. It's just emergency operations. What I was hearing from what Bruce was saying is that, and Rick, in the fact that emergency operations, we have learned from this last year, is an entire city staff function. And I agree with that. It would be so much better to have a totally safe city hall somewhere so that it is the emergency. But if we have to split things up because of this one site being in the worst possible spot to have a city hall, not the worst, but a bad one. Downtown would be worse. Right next to my house would be worse. So that would be my leaning right now. But again, that's where I think the pros and cons would really help. I'm getting bleary-eyed. So do we need to set a date right now for another meeting, or?
I think from a staff standpoint, we'd like specific direction as to what that meeting would be about.
Well, what I would do, again, let me just pose my possibility is that each one of the city council sits down and looks at their pros and cons.
Well, how do we establish what the subjects are that we are pro and conning? Are you going to send us?
My take right now is we need to all put in the facts that we think are important. We coalesce them all into one. And then we start talking as a group, what is good and what is bad, and eliminate from there. There will be duplicates.
So how do we go back? I guess Bruce probably needs to know how we go about doing that so that he can distribute something to us.
Again,
I don't know if there's any new information.
Yeah, I other than your 11 ideas, which I'm not sure that you completely shared with us, I don't know that there are other than, and the food and beverage tax question, I'm not sure we have anything else to talk about. I mean, any other options to discuss?
Well, I could share this with you and then we'll have something to talk about.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
But just sharing a list with you, you need to sit down and look at it and say, these are the good ideas and these are the bad ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have something to talk about.
So maybe you can give it to Bruce and he can distribute it to us and we can come up with suggestions and opinions and then talk about it at that next meeting we have.
Okay. Everybody good with that?
Yes.
I'm fine with that.
So the next meeting is your 11 options and we'll go over those.
Yeah, we'll sit down and it might not be 11, just because some of these are actually stupid. But they are the choices that we have. And maybe I'll just put them in there so you can understand what the stupid ones are. So we'll see.
So are you wanting to discuss this on May 18th or on June 1st?
We have something on May 18th, don't we? So.
Besides the Robertson decision, what else do we have to do on the 18th?
So on the 18th, we're going to have a special meeting to vote the special event ordinance. We have a proclamation reviewing the Cannon Beach Elementary RFQ, the Roberts findings. And then on the work session side, we have the Nicoos Monument language where Dick Bash will be here on Zoom. Jan's going to do a Friends of the Tree presentation. We have a rate resolution that we're going to present to you guys and a building maintenance budget amendment. Jeff will have a short TSP update, a discussion about the special funding options.
It's all on the 18th.
Stop. That was all on the 18th. And remember, we split these meetings up to have 3 so they weren't so long.
Yeah.
That's 2021. Now what are we doing?
So not the 18th.
Should we think about the 25th then?
Do you want to?
May 25th?
Let's just, we got Wednesday, the 19th is reserved for. a
It's
budget meeting.
budget, yeah.
And I suspect we may not need that meeting.
Oh, that's
The
possible.
way we went through the first week and what's left depends on her. Maybe able to wrap it up.
Well, we'll know after tomorrow.
Exactly.
No pressure, Karen.
No pressure.
So, I mean, it's just, yeah, it's one,
That makes sense, yeah.
I'm not doing anything else.
The room, is it available in the evening and not, because the budget meeting was scheduled?
Oh, that's a good point.
So the room is available at 1 o'clock or in the evening. It's also available on the 25th if you wanted to do that next Tuesday.
When is planning?
Planning Commission falls on
27th
Thursday, the
or-
27th.
27, okay.
Yeah, so if we avoid Thursdays, we're good.
Would you
Well,
want
how
to do
about
it?
we provisionally plan for Wednesday, the 19th, and if it works out that's not going to happen because of whatever happens tomorrow, we move to the 25th.
Now, are you thinking at 1 o'clock or the evening?
Evening.
1 o'clock.
Okay.
For the 19th, the evening.
Yeah, 6 o'clock, just,
Okay.
if I'm just saying that, I'm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Okay, because,
Okay.
okay. Got a plan.
Well,
Last item is 2.
There too. And the 4th of July.
Oh, the 4th of July. I'm sorry, I missed the 4th of July. 4th of July. Too long, I don't think.
No. Staff recommendation is that we don't move forward with the 4th of July this year. I've talked to at least one of the people at the Legion, talked to Nancy Teagan, and everybody agrees that there's too much up in the air. And we don't want to find out that we're in high or extreme and then see y'all come on down and sit next to each other. So the recommendation is that we don't do the parade this year. I'm not saying that, I like Sam's idea that maybe we have a, goodbye COVID parade or something later on when conditions are right.
Well, that's cute. I like that.
Yeah, an end of summer.
Yeah, maybe an end of summer parade or something like that, but I think it's too soon for that event now. Is the recommendation.
We can make a whole bunch of COVID pinatas.
Yeah.
No, we don't want to spread it.
And COVID's back.
Hello, goodbye.
The only concern, and I've been hearing some people asking, last week, I had a ton of folks in the gallery that are second homeowners that have come in the gallery every year, same time, asking about 4th of July. Because they've already planned to be here at that time. So my only, I'm not advocating anything, I'm just saying we need to be aware that there's going to be spontaneous stuff happening.
You're gonna be busy, Jason.
If we can get the word out that
Oh, I know.
something in the later summer, that might help alleviate that.
Mhm.
We'll see.
It would be the wise thing to do.
Well, Labor Day wouldn't be a bad time to,
Every day would be-
about a parade.
And there's
I know.
already a ton of people here anyhow.
The library is talking about doing their book sale on Labor Day weekend, so.
Okay, I'd agree with the recommendation.
Mhm.
Okay,
And, yeah, Nancy already knows, and I'll probably go over to the Legion board meeting or whatever tomorrow.
Last thing we added.
Roofs.
To look at the Cannon Beach Elementary roof. Sean, you on? I'm sorry, I said it might be as late as 7:30 before we call. Yeah. Sean Smoot. Okay, great.
where'd it go? Here it is. Found it.
Wake up, Sean.
They're on.
There it is.
Hey, he's still on. Look like you
Still
just
here.
woke up, man.
Waited so long, he's growing a beard.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think this one should be pretty quick for us. For our last discussion last month, y'all had requested some renderings for the different roofing options. And I have those with me now. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you. If I can figure out how to do that. There we are. Can everybody see that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Downtown.
Okay, so we've got two options to show you. We've got the shake and then just a normal architectural asphalt shingle. Here's kind of what the shake looks like. Now, things to notice here that this is brownish. It'll look like that when it's new, and then it's going to go gray very quickly. We left this is the existing siding that is cedar shake. That is the gray color that we're trying to emulate there. It is painted right now, so it's not exactly what it looks like. This image here is a little closer. So there's that blue paint that's on there. That's a wood shake. Notice the green flashing. That's what we're recommending we do here. Of course, sometime in the hopefully not too distant future, the siding will be taken care of as well. So this is kind of a long-term decision to make, right? I wouldn't necessarily recommend that we base all of the decisions on what is here currently, as the siding really does need to be replaced. That's not a part of this project, but hopefully, in the next 3-5 years, something like that, the funds can be found. This is the asphalt shingles here. So we're showing just a normal gray one. That is what we would recommend for a color. It's super flexible as far as what we do with the front of the structure, with the re-siding, and with the new entryway. Having the gray roof there really is going to complement just about anything. The cedar shake will more or less do the same thing. The one thing that kind of struck me when I took a look through these was, well, in this rendering in particular, as this new wood shake ages and turns gray to match what's here, really turns into kind of a monotone thing we've got going on. Now, of course, we can offset that with paint. You could paint the gable ends another color, something like that. I think that would work out just fine as well. We've got a few other shots in here. Now that we have these built, it's really easy for me to go back, rotate the building, change lighting conditions, things like that. So please let us know if you'd like to see some more images. That's not a big deal. You can see in this one, the lighting is starting to change a little bit. This is a little closer to evening time. So it's getting a little bit warmer, and that gray is starting to look a little bit more reddish. So we've got a decision to make as far as shingle versus cedar shake. I do not think that needs to be made before we go out to bid. It's good that you all have these and you can see them and start thinking about it, but I would strongly recommend that we just continue with both options. I'll include the cedar shake as an alternate in the bid so that we can get hard numbers on them. I know that getting numbers on things like this is going to be super important to you all, and what we've given you is a little bit shaky as far as nailing down a good number. That has a lot to do with the market conditions right now. Things are a little bit shaky in the market. I've got a number of projects that went out to bid about a month ago that we definitely saw a little bit of sticker shock on. Prices are up anywhere between 30 to 80% on materials.
Mhm.
Are there any questions about these renderings, about the options, drawbacks to either one? process for the bid.
For us to move forward, we would need you either to make a selection or to say that both of those are possible so that we can take that to design review board for their approval.
Oh, okay, understood. Both are possible. And I would recommend that we proceed with both for the bidding stage. Select an alternate once we have a contractor on board.
Yeah, I agree with taking them both to the bidding. My concern with design review is how we ask or what we ask of them. Because not having actual finished concepts or what else might be happening, this is not a finished design presentation. So I guess it is, I would ask them for like preference, not a conclusion.
I would ask for a conclusion because it's going to be built during the summer.
I agree with that. I think it's really important to be able to have the two choices in order to, I have a feeling that, as Mr. Smoot said, the sticker shock is going to come into play with the shakes. I'm personally comfortable with the asphalt shingles, but of course would prefer the shakes. But in order to get this process moving forward, I really would ask the design review board to consider either option.
Like if we go out to bid and we get bids in June, July, we have to know, if it's acceptable or not.
And the supply of the shakes could be difficult too.
I guess where I'm coming from is if that's where we want to go, that's fine. But that means I think we should then make a preference first. And tell the design review, this is our preference, this is our alternate. Do you have recommendations other than that? Because if it's ultimately our decision and where this is going to go, and we have a better handle on some of the aspects of I don't know, maybe we don't. And that, saying that, I will say that I would prefer actually right now the comp than the shake. Because shake is going to command the mass of the building more than the comp will. The comp might be darker, but the shake will have a very textural feeling that is different, where I think the ends should be the focal point of texture. And also the comp also gives the easternmost section, the bump out area, more distinction. Depending on what happens with windows and doors and all that other stuff that has yet to be considered. So that would be my choice.
I could go with the composition as long as we use a really top grade, or rustic, textural, something that not like you see on most houses, but something that has some depth to it. And then go with comp. I think you end up with it's gonna cost more, but probably not near as much as shake, and still be a good long-lived product. So I guess before I'd say I'd comp, I'd like to see some actual samples of some good architectural quality samples of shingles. But
we can provide those.
I think it's gonna get down to dollars and cents on everything. This is gonna be a big difference.
When can you get them to us, Sean? Problem is, we got design review board Thursday evening.
Thursday evening.
Well, we have packets this Thursday.
Well, packets go out Thursday, yes.
Packets go out Thursday, the meeting's the following Thursday.
And there's no reason you couldn't go up to the lumberyard and get some examples of 30-year high-grade comp to have, because they're, companies they're different, but they're relatively the same. I mean, the bidding process is going to change which company you work with. I'm trying to remember, I used Feather something, and they're not even in business anymore. So that's, you can get samples, if not up the road.
What's that, builder's first choice? Is that what they call it? Yeah. Sean, could you maybe look at what builder's first choice has available that would meet the standards that you would anticipate putting on this building? And that might save a little time of getting some samples there. I'm just thinking of the logistics of this. Go and select something, package it up, send it here. When we could maybe ask somebody from Public Works to go up and maybe with one of us and say, here's 3 or 4 different samples we think may fill the bill, and bring those back.
You could get something to us by next Tuesday, couldn't you?
Next Tuesday, absolutely, yeah. I think I have most of the samples I'd want to send you in my office, with the exception of maybe some of the nicer asphalt shingles. You'd mentioned a more 3-dimensional shingle. I know exactly what you're talking about. I have a product in mind, but I'd have to order that one. That's not to say I can't get it before next Tuesday. It's very likely that I can, and I'll get on that tomorrow morning.
So then we can go to design review board and still say we have 2 options, but we'll give you the final of the 2, the 20th, I guess it is. So we could do it that way. So you'll be able to touch them between now and then.
Yeah, and I would just tell them that, we got comp and we got shake or shingle. Shakes won't work, shingles. And say, this is our first choice. This is our second choice. This one's going to be more expensive and quite likely might be eliminated because of expense. So there you go. This is going to be a tricky project all along.
So do you want me to add this on the agenda for the 18th so you guys can look at the samples?
Sure.
Yes.
Sure, why not? It's gonna be another long meeting. Where's that open bar that you?
Put it on first. Okay. Any other concerns about that? Nope. Okay, thank you, Sean.
Thanks, Sean. Sorry to keep you so late.
Not a problem. Thanks, everybody.
Already home. Okay, anybody got anything for good of the order?
Coffee with the counselors next Monday morning at 10 o'clock.
Okay. Tomorrow at 1 o'clock, so.
Oh, yeah.
Probably be it, but.
Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.